Hello and welcome. This is a highlights reel of a series of 14 shows comprising the building of a Toyota Landcruiser that was purchased on the internet blind and then rebuilt. We learnt purchasing blind is a very bad idea, and in this case a very, very bad idea. But the team, and a quick shout out to the team, Paul Marsh, Hubert Snymans and Terrain Tamer Parts, all came together in Cape Town, South Africa to restore, and I use the word restore, not refurbish, because this proves without question that if you're purchasing a used 4x4, blind or not, you want a shopping vehicle, you want a mall vehicle, you do not want one that has been modified in any way. Even a roof rack can be a bit of a stretch. In this particular case, they had, believe it or not, converted this Landcruiser, this beautiful 105 Landcruiser with a full-time four-wheel drive system, into a two-wheel drive only vehicle. Had they done this knowingly, I cannot tell you, but the horror story was revealed to us as we started going through the vehicle that we had bought, well, I had bought, and we as a team had decided that we were going to invest our time and energy into restoring, and we ended up with a beauty. There was a lot of effort involved and a lot of teaching involved. The teaching part of this, of course, is part of the Overland workshop. So if you want to find out more about learning about building vehicles, overlanding vehicles and expedition vehicles and using them to their fullest, join us on the overlandworkshop.com. This video is over 3 hours long. As I said, it is the highlights of that build, culminating in the test run across South Africa. Welcome to the show. Two months ago, I purchased a 20-year-old Landcruiser. I was in Australia, but the vehicle in South Africa. It's for my own use in Africa when I visit to come and explore. Yet another dreary airport wait. I'm in Johannesburg. Just arrived after an 11-hour flight from Perth, and normally when I come to Africa, I've come to do a big trip somewhere amazing and to tell some stories. Not this time. This trip is very different. It's 2024. That means 40 years that I've been exploring the world's most remote places in four-wheel drives in association with the Overland Workshop. I'm flying into the town of George on the coast, not far from the southern tip of Africa. I've purchased, blind, a Landcruiser, and I'm on my way to see it for the first time. There's quite a bit at stake here. So here I am. I saw a glimpse of it. Hello, Fani. Yes. Very nice to meet you.
Same here.
Nice to meet you.
That's Jacob.
Oh, Jacob, nice to meet you. Ah, there you go.
Goosebumps.
Eh?
I miss my car.
You're going to miss your car. I'm glad you're going to miss your car, because if you're going to miss your car, it means you've loved your car.
I will have to a lot.
We'll go and have a look. Unlike other 100 series Landcruisers, the 105 has solid axles front and back, and like the 80 series, manual 5-speed gearbox, full-time four-wheel drive with lockable centre, front and back differentials. No electronics, diesel engine, and this one has done 300,000 kilometers. Well, it's too bad if I didn't like it, eh? See, I paid for it. But they're very rare, so I had to either take it or leave it. So I thought I would take the risk, and she looks good. It actually looks better than the pictures. Which is a very nice surprise. Great. I'm a happy man. After a good night's sleep and a drive of about 7 kilometers, first impressions are very positive. Very positive. Feels reasonably tight for 300,000 kilometers. It feels good. The suspension doesn't feel particularly well set up. It has a 3-inch lift, which is a little bit more than I would normally put on this vehicle. The interior looks in better condition than it did on the photographs, but I think that's because the previous owner had it cleaned, and cleaned properly. But let me cut to the chase. What don't I like about it? That's the first thing. It's a bull bar, but it actually is a bull bar from a 79 series that's been adapted. It's not very nice. It's TJM. They don't make a bad bar, but it doesn't look that great. The rock sliders, yeah, quite nice actually. They'd be very slippery to stand on in the wet. But you know, tires, Pirelli Scorpions. Nah, I don't rate them highly at all for the kind of driving I do. Rear bumpers, actually not bad at all, but I'm going to replace it because I'm going to put in a GoBX, because the GoBX is just the best I've ever used, and I've been offered one, so I'm going to change it. It's a lot better than that. And the interior again is really quite nice. So I'm pretty chuffed this morning. I feel good about this decision and this choice. I like the colour. It's unusual. I'm actually excited about it. And now, of course, I've got to drive it to Cape Town. Now, in Cape Town is where we are going to strip it mechanically and all the mechanical upgrades. And then following that, I'm going to drive all the way to Pretoria, and we're going to turn the inside into a Campertura. With this mileage on this vehicle, there is no play on the steering. It's absolutely normal. That's remarkable. I think that's pretty exceptional. The ride isn't particularly nice. It's a bit jittery, and it's not terrible. Now, it has Ironman springs, and my experience of Ironman springs is that they're fairly firm. They produce a firm ride, and the shock absorbers are not Ironman. I think they are the TJM shock absorbers, but that's not the problem with the ride. The ride is jittery because I believe its lift is 3 inches, and that's contributing to it, and that perhaps maybe they didn't do sufficient caster correction bushes on it, so it's a little bit sensitive on the steering at speed, and the ride is a bit jittery. I mean, I've owned these vehicles before, and I know how good the ride can be, and yeah, I can get a lot better than this. But it's not terrible. It's just, you know, I'm being picky. The engine is sweet. It's pulling like a 1HZ. It's like what do I say? I think the expression I'm trying to reach for is couldn't blow the froth off a cappuccino. Cracked windscreen. The seller didn't mention that. I'm assuming he forgot, because he did mention quite a few things. That the handbrake doesn't work. He mentioned that. I'll sort that out. There is a clunking in reverse gear. I can feel it. My guess is it's quite serious. I don't think that's going to be an easy fix. That's the sum total of I have no other concerns about this vehicle at all. None at all. It's running nicely so far. It's lovely. It's going to do the job brilliantly. So I'm very happy, very, very excited. Very, very excited. Snymans 4-wheel drive is a Landcruiser specialist outside of Cape Town. They specialise in doing exactly this, rebuilding old Landcruisers and bringing them a new life, or even sometimes bringing them back from the dead. Leading this rebuild is my close friend and friend of the channel, Paul Marsh. Paul should be here. Paul!
Andrew!
How you doing, mate?
How are you, man? Good to see
Very
you.
good.
Hey? Back in Africa.
Yeah.
And what a beautiful car.
Hey, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I like the colour.
Nice colour,
I really
eh?
do, yeah. Well, you know, these vehicles are in my heart because the 80 and the 105 are such capable trucks.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've both driven them and we both love them.
Yeah.
And now we've got one to play with.
Well,
It's going to be...
to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have done this if you hadn't been around, because yeah, I know the I know the basics, but I don't know the in-depth.
Well, look, that's what
And
we
you
want
know
to do.
these things as deep as you can go.
They are.
So I would be relying on other people to know in depth, as I am now, but I know you know.
I love them. Look, I mean, over the years, you know, I remember being in England, going to a show in England, and filling my stand-up with Land Cruisers
Yes.
at a Land Rover show.
Yes. At a Land Rover
At a
show.
Land Rover show. And, you know, the whole thing at that point in time, the Land Rover is a very capable vehicle. And
Yes.
England didn't have much in the way of overland Land Cruisers.
Yes.
And, you know, I think they both have a place in the market.
Yes.
In my heart, I think people used to want to cut me open and say half Land Rover, half Land Cruiser. But my heart really, the Cruisers
But
are really, really
you say that,
good
but you
vehicles.
drove a Discovery from London to Cape Town.
I've driven a Discovery
So-
pretty much around the world.
Yeah.
And I've driven Defenders and I've driven Range Rovers.
Yeah.
And they're all good vehicles.
Yeah.
Here in Africa, these do dominate.
Yes.
And in particular, I think the 105 is just, well, we both know you've owned one. I've got an AT.
Yeah.
We've done lots of work on them. They're beautiful vehicles to build up because they're really comfortable and they're really strong. Let me introduce you to your bear, Andrew. I'm going to go and fetch him and bring him out. I know he's very excited to see you
Okay.
and very keen to see the truck.
I have a feeling that I'm about to... You see, I know the basics. These guys are in a different league when it comes to machinery, mechanics, drivetrains, engines, okay? I'm about to learn an enormous amount. And that is not... I mean, that really is fantastic for me.
Your bear, meet Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I know this car.
You know this car?
Yes, a couple of years back it came on a trailer. The whole roof was flat.
What do you mean that the roof was flat?
Yeah, it was a massive accident. We had to fit in other roof and
So you fitted...
the roof and
The roof.
the whole fender was cut off. And the back chassis part was bent.
Well, that's not great news.
No, not really.
Is that why it was sprayed?
I think so. Yeah, you can see all the markings.
I don't see any marks.
What do you reckon, eh? I don't know.
Well, we did a good job on it.
The job's not bad. It isn't bad.
And there's no
You could have
cracks.
got it didn't crack, which is good. I bet if we go on the inside, we'll find the welds.
But
Do you
usually
think we should show him the welds?
we usually hide the welding so good.
What colour was it before?
Yellow, yeah. Yellow
I think so. Yeah.
is like a primer color.
Because this is a silver car.
It was, yeah. I know it's the same car.
It is the same car.
Yeah, absolutely. You sure?
I should still have photos.
You can't honestly believe that that's the case. But the look on your face is priceless.
This is not how I was hoping to look at this moment.
We had to catch you. We had to. It was too priceless to actually. I said
You mean
to
you're b***ing me?
We are absolutely taking. I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it.
Okay, full marks, but you do understand this is not going to go unanswered. Okay. Okay, and I will never trust you again.
It was just too tempting.
Good one,
I
good
really
one.
would-
That bastard. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, to be honest.
And it's not been cut and it hasn't been in an accident, but we couldn't resist.
I know this car, the artist was in a massive accident and had no roof. And then the chassis was bent.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well.
Okay. Should we go and have coffee so I can calm down a bit?
Well, I think, Jobé and I have been very excited about the project because, he knows me. We're very passionate about these 80s and the 105s. And this particular 105, it's a great color. It's a lovely, looks in very good condition. And the mechanical stuff we are going to go through and pull apart and change, but you do that on any vehicle. And that's to be expected. I mean, we know that all the time when we pull diffs apart, we check the backlash and we redo wheel bearings and, as we go through the whole car, bumper to bumper. So we're expecting to find stuff on this car. But there's nothing that can't be repaired because of the integrity of the body, and we'll look inside just now, is good. But that's, for me, is the key thing. The chassis, the body, gearbox can be repaired. Diffs can be repaired. There's always a balance to strike on what you're going to spend on a car. And you never want to pick a car that you've got to do everything because then the bill becomes enormous and ridiculous.
Yes. I always say you can buy a car that's mechanical rough, but if you buy a car that's a rattle box, it's difficult to repair that.
Okay.
But mechanical you can repair and take it back to new.
Right.
But the rattle box, then you start.
Yes. It's just not a rattle box.
No, well, you can see. I mean, the door lines. That's what I'm looking at.
It drove well. It didn't. It was solid on the road. The suspension layout is not good, but
But you're going to change that.
But the basic feel of the gearbox, the pull, solid, good. It's a good solid vehicle. It doesn't actually feel 20 years old and 300,000. So,
that's not a lot
and I
of
actually even
mileage.
drove it on a little bit of gravel road. It wasn't. Didn't suddenly hear a whole lot of really horrible noises. Not at all. So I think it's good and solid.
And they always say, 1HZ, you run these engines in at 100,000
Exactly.
kilometers. So in fact, it's got 200,000 or 300,000 kilometers. It's actually not a lot. If the engine is sounding good, is not using a lot of oil, is not smoking massively, they go on for a long, long time.
Yeah, it smokes a little bit on a startup.
Yeah, but they all do that.
They all do it.
Fine.
It's smooth. It's not particularly heavy on fuel. I measured my fuel consumption. It's a little
That's
bit heavier
great.
than normal, but not a lot.
Yeah.
It's not. It's gear change is all good. The gearbox shift, good, smooth. Clutch has got a judder in it. We're going to sort that. Brakes have got there's obviously one of the discs, maybe two have got a warp because when you brake lightly, you can feel the,
See, that's the knowledge of knowing what when you're going to look at a car, knowing what you're going to change. It's like walking into a home and going, I can see the bigger picture. I paint this, I put this, do the garden up, and it'll be a really nice home. Well, this is someone's home. So what we want to look at and say, what are we changing? What are we going to make new? And what integrity, like Hubert says, the integrity of the body, the chassis, the engine, the gearbox, they're strong, especially in these models. So if these are intact and good, then the work you have to do can be looked at as service, maintenance, preventative, making more reliable.
Right.
And also the 105 and the 80 was built on the same principle.
Yes.
Same chassis, same suspension.
Yes.
It's basically just the brakes and the hubs that's different.
Yeah.
So you've got something that works.
Like some coffee. I would like some coffee, yes, actually, since you asked.
A bit of shot of brandy, we throw it in.
A bit of
I can still see the camera shake.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think now. I can't actually concentrate on the vehicle. I'm just thinking about how to get you back. I haven't come up with anything quite yet, but I will.
The number of times I've been on a trip with this bugger, and it's who's going to catch who first. So I'm one up. Yeah.
I think you might be more than one up, actually.
I should be worrying a bit.
Yeah, I would. That's the whole point of this.
Exactly.
Just that you worry.
Was modified.
So these engines came into South Africa and then they fitted turbos to a lot of these models, done by Alpine. There's a lot of telltale signs you'll see. And it's always a worry when they've fitted a turbo to a motor that's non-standard. Some of the companies used to modify the pumps and do work on the pumps, and you never really know what they've done. But the fact that they've taken it out is one of two things. Either it did damage to the motor, and what Jabez is also picking up is that the head has been off, which is good because it means that they've actually had to do work on the engine. Fair enough, probably pulled the head off. We won't know until if it had to get opened. So the telltale signs is to do a compression test, check that out, monitor the oil usage, see how much oil it's using. What is it doing any heavy vaporizing through the oil filler that's coming up on the sump?
What have you seen in the last 2 minutes? This bonnet's been open. What are you seeing?
I think this engine part has been butchered.
Yeah, has it?
Yeah. This I can count the faults in 5 seconds. The radiator is shot. The electric fan is not right. No aircon belt. Wrong manifold. Aircon radiator is buggered. There used to be a intercooler here that was taken out.
Actually, I think often what happens is people add another complexity to what's already good. And I often believe that, Toyota built a really good vehicle with a lot of very good engineers and many years experience designing something that really works well, or they wouldn't have their reputation. And then people come in and change a lot of that, like adding a turbo and stuff to give power in that. And we want to go away from that. We're trying to take a car like this and say, we want to build back in the reliability. So it's important when you're going through the car now and saying, what are the things we're finding, and where would we spend our money? What would we prioritize? Because that's key. And the cooling system has to be one of the highest priorities you're going to look at to get that right. Because short of that, you're actually going to have a knock-on effect of more problems going forward. This can all be undone and sorted.
But you and I saw in the photographs that this was not standard. If we had known this a month ago, would we be here doing this, or would we have walked away from the vehicle?
Okay, so that's a really, really good question, because quite often, when you don't look deep enough in a car, you can't strip everything before when you come to look at it. It's like buying a house. You don't always know that there are cracks in the house. You don't know that the foundations have got subsidence. And suddenly you find in a few months' time a bit of rain, like we're having now, which is great for Cape Town, but you find that these cracks appear. So we will uncover stuff which you wouldn't have known when you bought the car.
Sure. But this we knew.
This we knew. Nothing wrong with having an aftermarket radiator. From the photograph, we couldn't see the fins.
No, I mean, it's terrible.
But that's fine.
That's
this radiator will come out.
Yeah.
And you
Wow.
take this radiator and have a complete recall. Okay?
Terrible.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's really bad. I was just feeling the aircon thing, and that's also not very good. But
So take it like this. You said, any vehicle, we would take the radiator out. Any vehicle.
sure.
And if it's got a plastic radiator top and bottom, we tend to take those out and leave them out. People like Terrain Tamer build a really good radiator. And if they made one for this car, we'd be fitting it because they make a really good quality. It's got a thick wall radiator, it's fusion welded, so it's a really good, strong radiator. Short of that, we take a radiator like this, which has been custom built for this vehicle, take it, strip it, put a new core in, and it's like a new radiator. The value of having these radiators is that you can repair them in the bush. If it leaks and cracks, you can take it out, you can find a little radiator shop somewhere, and the guy will be able to solder it back together. If it's a plastic top radiator, you won't be able to repair it unless they can give you the parts, because you don't repair them, you replace the top tanks and seals and stuff. So that's what we want for Expedition. You'd want to try and go back to viscous fan, because you want to take out all the potential problems. The aircon's not working, but we're not surprised when we look at it.
There's no belt.
There's no belt, is it? And we probably can uncover more stuff with it.
Yeah. Yes.
Did they take the belt off because it was generating too much extra draw for engine power and drag? Was there a problem?
Or is this the bearings in the compressor gone and was making a hell of a noise, or?
And they're nice to have.
No, I want an aircon, thanks.
What's an aircon? Okay, not a fan of an aircon.
Sorry, I want an aircon.
Okay.
We can buy you that small one on the dash.
No, I want this one to work, please.
We'll take this fan and put it in the car.
So what Paula and Hubert are going to do now is going to go through the engine and make a list of things that, firstly, they are going to replace, and secondly, they're going to investigate replacing. And this will tell the story of the engine and its components. I hope it has a happy ending.
It will always have a happy ending. It just depends on the pain through it and what we've got to spend.
I know.
I think at the end of the day, one telltale for me is you've just driven at 500 kilometers.
Yes.
And if you'd had anything really wrong with this car, you would have picked up a lot in the drive.
Yes.
So drive is very important when you drive a car. But the positive side of this, where you picked up and you found it was low on oil, now you can actually see how something like this can relate to that and cause it. Okay, I'm not saying that lack of maintenance is any excuse. It's a poor excuse for looking after an engine. You know, you should maintain this. You should keep the oil topped up. But I'm trying to link the story of this. This has a knock-on effect of what can happen and other things you pick up, and that's what we look for. So the same here. When I'm looking here, when I'm buying a car, I'm looking inside here. Now this is nice and clean. Okay, there's no real residue in it. It's got a bit of black. I expect that. That's fine. If this had white sort of like a oil, frothy white oil in there, it looks like mayonnaise almost, you'd walk away from the car, because that's straight away telling me there's a problem on the cooling system. That means that the water is getting into the cooling into the oil, and it's causing that problem. So one of the telltales inside in the cap here is there anything that's created in here? Is there any white residue, white yellowish residue? Oil and water don't like mixing, and that's what you're seeing when you see that.
Yes, it's a greyish pale.
Well, it's like it's a yellowy grey cup, but yeah, you'll see it. You can see it from there. It's more light than it is dark.
Yes.
Okay. You'll also pick it up on the dipstick. So before I'm doing anything, I want to say, okay, and if I see that, I walk away, because right now I know there's an expensive job on this. That means the cylinder head's coming off. Did it damage the rings? How hot did it get? I don't want to risk it.
So question now, when I took the vehicle immediately, I drove it for 1.5 kilometers, pulled into a service station and checked the oil, and when I took that off, quite a bit of vapor was coming out of the crankcase.
Yeah.
Is that a tail sign? It seemed to be quite a lot of it. Now you've taken it off and there was none.
Yeah.
So is that
So
vapor
let's look here.
an indicator?
So this is another telltale here.
Yeah.
The vapor you're seeing is actually the pressure that comes up from the sump, okay? And that normally escapes, it comes into the tappet cover and it comes out here.
And that's got a kink in
Okay,
it.
and it's got a kink in it.
So it's blocking
All
it.
right, so exactly. So now we've got to another thing. What you saw is a result of this, okay? So not good, and also if it's too much, you can actually fit a catch can, which is not a bad
Toyota
thing.
does with the newer versions of the 180, it's got a little catch can.
Catch can, actually, and the Terrain Tamer do a really nice catch can. I fit them to all the V8s,
Okay.
and even to these older vehicles, not a bad thing, because it does actually take that mist, that oil residue mist, and it reduces that from going back into the inlet manifold, caking that up. So, you know, part of what we want to check now is how dirty is this inlet manifold? Does this need to be cleaned out from all that residue? The fact that that's got a kink in it hasn't served you, but it's shown up in when you took that
Right.
off. So you see how it actually starts to make sense,
Okay.
what you're seeing.
Okay.
If I was checking the car to see, is it breathing as they talk heavily? In other words, is there a very excessive vapor, oil vapor, which is telling me that there's a bit of excessive crankcase pressure. And that's coming because the rings are not sealing properly, and there's a bit of blow by when the piston comes up. It's pushing pressure into the crankcase. So when you see that, that's also telling me a story. And when I take that off while the engine's running, or I take this pipe off and it's excessively pumping out a residue there, that's also going to tell me a story. Okay, so on the aircon itself, obviously the belt's missing, and we need to understand what's causing it. So before we do anything, we'd have to put a belt on, test
And
it,
run it, yes.
run it, check if there's any gas in. We've got an aircon machine that we'd have to check all that and make sure that is there gas in. Before we're going to do any of that though, we might as well change the aircon condenser, because that needs to be changed. So we'll connect the machine to it, pull any gas out so it doesn't go into the environment, and then start from there. Put the aircon condenser in, change anything else that could be a problem. This pulley here is quite often a problem, and it's got
Yes,
a
it was
small-
with my 105. I had to replace the bearing of that pulley. Yes.
You can carry a spare bearing, if I'm
Yes,
correct.
and-
It's a 6203 bearing.
Right.
the challenge is that people often over tighten the belts. So belts go hard. It doesn't take too long for the belts to get hard, especially in this hot ambient temperature. And when they start to squeal, instead of changing them for a slightly softer, more grippy belt, they just tighten
it up.
Yeah. And that puts a lot of strain on bearings. Alternator as well, you know. And also on the alternator, you'll notice it's got twin belts.
Yes.
So these belts are actually a matched pair when you buy them from Toyota.
Yes.
So they are actually cut from the same sort of, they're not going to be uneven, one's not going to be tighter than the other. You want them to work almost in unison. So that's also important because that's where people also compromise. When you're buying aftermarket parts, you need to actually make sure that they match up as best can. And sometimes you're guessing. I was driving across America in a Prado 90 series. The front lower ball joint collapsed on us. We were lucky we didn't have anything fatal or critical. I walked into a Toyota dealership at 4:45 in Orange County, and the guy and I looked through his parts, because they don't do that model in the States, and I guessed that the FJ Cruiser runs a similar chassis. And he picked that off a parts thing.
Yes.
The next morning at 8 o'clock he had the part in his hand and it was the right part.
Okay.
So very, very lucky. Amazing. I couldn't believe it.
Yes, but you knew that FJ had such a similar chassis.
I knew
that
it.
it was
Yeah,
a pretty good chance.
I was just kind of like.
But many people wouldn't know that.
They wouldn't know that. No. That was just lucky. Again, you know, when I'm looking here at pipes, I'm looking at the pipes. So this is the pipe for the power steering reservoir there. Now that's weeping. So it's telling me that that pipe's probably gone very hard. Although it's got a hose clamp on, pipes get really hard, and then actually you'll see at the edges of the pipe, if we take it off, it's probably got cracks on it. So all the hoses on the actual vehicle, heater hoses, radiator hoses, power steering pipes, rubber hoses, we change. What I do like about the Terrain Tamer kits is that when you get a kit, it's all the hoses.
Everything's there.
Everything. There's one thing that these guys do very, very well, and it's something we're going to show a lot more of, is that they tend to put everything you need and make it as easy as they can to fit it. So if I'm fitting a clutch kit, the spigot bearings in the kit, the tool to align stuff's there. If I'm fitting hoses, all the hoses I need are a kit, and this really makes it much easier than trying to order individual hoses. Whatever you do, you need to make sure that if the hose is old and we don't know the age of this hose, but for the price of that hose, change it.
Critical part.
It's a critical part.
Even
Take the old one as a spare. Take the old one as a
Yes,
spare.
precisely.
You know, a lot of old parts make good spares.
Yes.
You don't have to have new parts.
Yes.
I'm a firm believer, put the new parts in the car, make sure it's right, it's tested. You know the old parts right because you've taken it off. And where possible, some of the old parts really are pretty good. And you may never use this radiator hose, but at least I know, peace of mind, I've got the new one on.
There is a distinct cracking noise when moving in reverse. It's vital that we find out the cause before work begins.
It's very difficult because the sound you hear will resonate through the car. But I think it's possibly a front CV joint.
It's now time to get it on the lift. What will we find underneath? Has the drivetrain been butchered like the engine?
It was the gearbox.
There is an oil leak between the engine and gearbox.
It's really difficult to actually, you know, you more often than not between the rear main oil seal, but then when you look a bit higher up, it could be further up from the cylinder head. Or it could be gear oil.
Someone welded the exhaust mount bracket. A sign of abject ignorance.
So what they've done here is made the exhaust solid, but you don't want the exhaust fixed because now the resonance is not carried on any rubbers. Whereas here you've got rubbers holding the exhaust. And you want the exhaust to be carried on rubbers so that you don't get the vibration and noise. The chassis is in fantastic condition. That's something I always look for. How does the chassis look? So shock absorbers we're going to change, rubbers we're going to change, anti-roll bar rubbers we're going to change, springs we're going to change, diff breathers. Here's a diff breather up here.
Yeah.
Normally these are blocked and we'll extend them to the front because these should be extended up so they don't get blocked up with mud. So one of the telltales is the swivel balls here. And you can see that's still in quite good condition, that one there. It's a little bit of corrosion wear there, which can be cleaned up. Okay, but that's often a telltale. And the vehicles that you get, like say in England, those get really badly pitted, and it's difficult to repair them. And you know, you'd have to change a whole casing, axle casing, to repair that. Unlike the Land Rovers, which I think have a good design, where you can bolt off those. Landcruiser doesn't.
Okay.
So one of my telltales is we'll strip all that down. There's a little bearing at the bottom, there's a little bearing at the top, and all these will be replaced. It's a complete kit. Inside there, the CV joint and drive shaft through to the diff here gets checked, and we'll take the diff out completely.
Well, we will. We'll do the.
We're going to take the diff out completely to check.
There's a bit of backlash. It's
Yeah.
not severe, but when driving in low speeds, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Will you pull that up when you do the diff? Do you pull up the backlash? Or?
Well, we'll first check the condition of the diff, the
Okay.
crown wheel and pinion, to see
Yes.
how they're meshing and what the wear is.
Yes.
And then look at the bearings. And then if we're going to do anything to the diff, we invariably put new bearings, new seals, and then adjust the backlash. Because it's a short change just to adjust the backlash.
Right.
You've got it out, do it properly, change the seal, especially this pinion seal over here. Okay, check the breather's clear, because quite often people don't realize that it's leaking here, but the cause is a blocked breather.
Of course, it's just pushing air out.
pushing. It's got to go somewhere, you know. And I've often said when I'm teaching people bush mechanics is that, you know, you've got a leak, and as long as you can check how much oil's going out, now you won't know, but if you look on the ground and you see it starting to leak, and maybe there's a little bit of a mark on the ground, top it up in the morning, so the car needs to be level. Take the filler out, which is on the back side here. Just put the oil in till it runs out. That's level. Drive 50k, stop, let it cool down, have a cup of tea, check. If it's 50 k's, you haven't lost any oil significantly, considering the oil has expanded slightly. Then go and do 100 k's. Do the same check. Then go and do 200 k's. Each time doubling up, you'll know when you need to put oil in. And I drove right across America with a leak in a transfer box, doing exactly that. Every third day I had to put a bit of oil in. And I wasn't repairing it, I was managing it. But I was managing it carefully enough to know that the amount of distance I could drive before I needed to put oil in was this amount, and I stuck to that. And that allowed me to keep driving where I could get somewhere where I could actually fix it properly. It wasn't critical, but it needed to be managed.
Hubert shows how the bushes have worn.
Yeah, and you can see,
This is to be expected.
It's completely torn.
Yeah. I've had these break on trips where people have broken them more often than not because the bushes weren't changed, weren't maintained, and they can snap. So it's important.
Is that because of the shock loading, because the bush is gone?
Yeah, the bush
now
is
the
gone.
shock
So
loading
now
is-
there's any movement when something has lost its.
The people that take it to the polyurethane people just to
Yeah.
make it a solid bush.
Yes,
So the rubber bush gives you movement,
yes,
but polyurethane doesn't.
yes.
That's why it snaps.
Actually, the Terrain Tamer does a really good bush, and when we come to looking at their bushes, it's a much better product that they use, like an Elastimo. It's a self-lubricating product, and the way they've designed the bush I've never seen before. On the inside, they use a cross-hatch, sort of serrated-like ridge inside, the little grooves, and in those grooves it traps the grease. And on the edge of the seal of the bush, it's got like a small lip, and that retains the grease more than other bushes, and it stops the dust coming in. So it's a clever design.
Wow, this is terrible.
Yeah, but that's common, it happens. Wears out, rots out.
Absolutely rotten, that radiator.
So what's telling me is good here is these pipes here often rust. This is all in good condition here. You know, the chassis you can see, although it's had a bull bar welded and adapted to fit, it's really in good condition, and that's what I look for. If a chassis is in good condition and it doesn't look like it's had any accidents, and the bodywork looks good, we can repair other bits in it. You know, the rust is the key thing for me. The fact that everything underneath is in place. You know, nothing looks like it's been changed, bastardized, all that. So this car doesn't look like it's had a really tough life.
But what's worrying me the most are the free-wheel front hubs, fitted by somebody that thought that converting this vehicle into part-time four-wheel drive would be a good idea. In order to make this viable, in addition to the hubs, something in the transfer gearbox would have to have been modified. But what?
The 105 has permanent four-wheel drive with a differential between front and rear prop shafts that is lockable. Some people add freewheeling hubs to basically stop the front part of the drivetrain from moving when traveling at high speed. And they do it because I have to make this assumption, they do it because they want to save fuel. It doesn't save fuel. I don't believe it saves fuel, okay? In all my experience with driving four-wheel drives and full-time four-wheel drives and part-time four-wheel drives and experimenting, it saves no fuel. I challenge you to measure it. The other part is that, of course, it saves on wear and tear. That's the theory. But it doesn't save on wear and tear because...
Now what happens in the front prop shafts, people with the freewheeling hubs, they stand still for a lot of the time people drive the car. And you should engage them on a regular basis to turn it, and you also should grease the prop shafts regularly. And when it sits in one place, bad
it
roads,
wears out, flying in a single plane.
You know, not good, but that will be part of your, when you turn it and clunk, and you can hear it's quite significant.
If I had known this, I probably would have walked away from this purchase. Well, it's too late now.
Adding things like that to a vehicle that is designed as a full-time four-wheel drive vehicle, to me, goes against the principles that Toyota have put into the vehicle to get it to work well. The biggest loser are the people that fit them. So we will be removing them and putting it back into standard form.
It shows you the three-wheel hubs are working. So that is just something very strange.
So the vehicle is slowly revealing its past.
There was a knocking noise, it was definitely from the front.
You think it was from the front?
Yeah.
The aim now is to try and sort out the only problem discovered is the loud noise being emanated from the vehicle in reverse. So I can see now that it's the only thing that they're actually a little concerned about. Because everything else we've seen, it's kind of, oh, well, we'll fix it. We'll replace the part. Not a challenge to sort out. But for this noise. So that's what we're trying to do now, is get to the bottom of that.
It's vital that we do so before we go any further.
It's hard to tell.
For me on the other side, it felt like the front. Well, at least I've given you a challenge.
No, sometimes the caliper bolt strip, and they usually the one fall out when you reverse. The caliper falls back.
Okay.
I found that before.
What we're going to do is actually put it on axle stands, all four wheels off,
And then drive
and
it.
drive it on axle stands. Then we can get underneath and actually see what's causing that.
Gearbox. What does that mean?
Gearbox.
Basically means we need to take it out, strip it.
Some gremlin in there. Someone's put a banana peel with some sawdust in. You know that old trick? Before they sell a car, it's noisy, you put a banana peel in with some sawdust.
Is that what you do?
Well done.
Time now to go through the stock of parts that's arrived on our doorstep thanks to Terrain Tamer.
Ah, that's the viscous fan clutch.
Your fan blades.
Yeah, belts on.
All the belts.
So this is what's amazing about these guys when you get it. You get a complete set of all the belts. You know, in a nice bag, which you can keep and use. These bags are often useful. And then you get the radiator hoses, but you get all the clamps and the small hoses that you always struggle to buy. So it's a complete cooling kit with the small hoses. And here, heater hose kit. Again, good quality hose clamps, gives the pipes. It's just, yeah, it's beautiful. Here's our bush kit. Very nice.
Bracket for the filter.
So this is the flash loop filter. So you've got two filters already in the car.
Yes.
We're going to probably end up removing one
One of them and replacing it with this. Yes.
And replace this, put this flash loop on it. The fact that you can see through that inspector is so valuable. So yeah, that's going to be really useful to us.
It's the hub
So this is, here we've got a spindle, and generally you find these all sealed up. These wear, and they've made some improvements on these when I was speaking to them. So I'm really interested to see. A lot of the terrain tamer parts have actually gone through a process of being tested, obviously by the mines in Australia, and the mines have actually shown the weaknesses in the parts. Okay, and where it's been OE parts, they've gone and worked with OE manufacturers to understand how, if they had a choice to redesign the part, they would improve on it. So because they're a unique company, they're like a four-wheel drive company who do parts in a complete sort of aspect, they were able to take the parts and say, how can we improve this part to make it better, and then put it back out in the market and test it. So I'm really excited to see some of the differences they've made and changed from some of the parts that are actually OE parts that they will have improved on. But certainly the way they put the kits together, as you can see, they put stuff together which really makes it much easier to take it and fit it onto the car. And if you're taking spares, to take a spare hose kit and put all your hoses in here, what a treat. I'm now going to put this as a spare kit in my car. Even if it's the old hoses I take off.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
It's a spare
So
kit.
nice. I can see what this bag actually gives. It's really lovely.
Really great.
So very excited about that.
So what we've got here, we've got a clutch. That's the fan.
This is a tropical fan. It's actually, it's just a design. I wouldn't know exactly what they've changed, but certainly they've made some improvements to make it more efficient for cooling. The vehicle here hasn't got this fan or the viscous, so we're going to refit it to make it better.
We do the clutch, coils.
So here's your wheel bearing kit. You got a knife there, too?
It's got the new spigot bearing inside.
Nice.
The older ones had a solid bush, so this one's got a little bearing.
Much better, eh? Yeah, that's nice. Nicely engineered.
Oh, it's Christmas. Look at that.
Oh,
Ooh,
nice.
eh? Gee, that's nice.
Very nice. Nicely done.
And apparently they've got some kind of double lip on these things.
So they've
Yeah,
got a
the double lip.
they've got a double lip on the seal. Very nice.
It's a little bush. Spare one for that.
So if you weren't changing
Bundles.
this, you'd put the new bush in, so keep those spare. And this is the whole swivel kit. Very nice. Wow. Good quality bearings. This is the one I was very curious on. So here's your the tube seal for the front CV.
Yeah.
But look here, look at how they've done it. It floats. It allows for a bit more movement.
Yeah. The old models from your 75 series and 60s seal was almost like the axle seal. So you didn't have a lot of movement, so they improved it with the newer models. So if your axle has a bit of play, the seal would run with it.
Otherwise the shaft runs inside, and if there's a bit of play or movement, and of course then the grease escapes. And the biggest problem you have is you have the CV joint grease escaping into the actual axle casing. And a lot of that CV joint grease is not good for the crown wheel and pinion, because it actually takes off the case hardening. So on the older cars, when they were servicing the cars, one of the things I always say to people is check the condition of the oil in the front diff when you're doing service week. So dip your finger in or drain a bit off to see if it's grey. If it's grey or discolored, drain it, flush it, and put new oil in. Because when the oil is mixed with the grease, it takes off the case hardening on the crown wheel and pinion, and you can see it. So it's important that your front diff is running in oil and not oil and grease mixed. But with these kind of seals, this is actually going to reduce a lot of that problem that's been caused over the years. So they've definitely made some nice improvements. It's impeller like. One thing I do like about what they do is you get a complete filter kit. So you get a sump washer, you get your oil filter, you get your fuel filter.
So that's like it's a service kit.
It's a complete
One
service kit.
Okay.
So you know, if you're traveling and you want to go traveling with something, you take a kit like this.
Good stuff. outstanding.
It's very nicely put together, very nicely.
What's nice, they actually supply you with a front CV with the axle fitted and already greased.
And greased.
Oh, they supplied those too.
Wow, that's brilliant. As you see, that's often the case. People don't grease them properly. And now you can just put that straight in. So here's the rear wheel bearing kit. Now we've got universal joints. What we will do with your prop shaft is send them off and have them reconditioned and let the guys fit these universal joints and then balance the shafts again.
So the process is now basically to strip the vehicle down. We're checking the air conditioning because there was no air conditioning belt, so we need to know if there is a fault before other parts of the vehicle are stripped. Check the air conditioner, compression test, and then the vehicle will be dismantled and everything that we know we're going to be replaced, taken off, and in this case also the gearbox removed because we know that there is a gearbox problem. So I'll be back in the next few days and to follow progress as we go. And then I'm sure I will have hundreds of questions to ask Paul on why we are replacing some components. Are those components absolutely necessary to be replaced? Or is it just a good idea? And are we just doing it because we've got the support of people like Terrain Tamer? So my plan is that you, at the end of this, will understand what are the components that really, really must be replaced, what is optional, and what is a nice to have, and replace them if you can. That's the picture that I'd like to create and present over the next few weeks. Well, good morning. One full day has passed since I was last here, dropped the vehicle off, of course met Paul, chatted with Hubert, and if you haven't been watching the series, this is basically my build of my Africa Landcruiser. It's a 20-year-old vehicle. There's 300,000 kilometers of work behind it, and we are rebuilding it and preparing an overland truck that I will be using for the channel for our exploration in Africa. Now, Snymans 4-wheel drive are specialists at Landcruisers. As you can see, there are Landcruisers as far as the eye can see, and we have now enough time has gone by for them to have actually stripped the vehicle down to where they now can service all the parts and then start replacing it. And we have discovered a few things that were a little bit unexpected. Alright, so here we have all of the bits that you've taken, or most of them anyway, that you've removed out of the vehicle. So I'm going to ask Paul to help us understand where to find signs of wear, and again to tell the story of the vehicle and how to decide whether things need replacing or can just go back and maybe if we don't have a limitless budget, go back and we know to keep an eye on them in the future. At this point we know that the gearbox has a major fault in reverse, so it's been sent off for a rebuild.
Gearbox.
Secondly, the transfer gearbox is being investigated. The presence of free-wheel front hubs suggests something isn't right there either.
So the prop is standing still.
The chassis is in good order.
It's really in good condition, and that's what I look for.
The cooling system is a bit of a mess, and the aircon has been disconnected. But with the basic investigations complete, Paul has decided that it's actually a better idea to remove the engine altogether. That was a bit of a surprise to me.
So Andrew, we've taken your car out, your engine out the car. It made a big difference. Because we had to change the engine mounts and because we had the gearbox off and the radiator out, it just made much more sense to pull the whole engine out with a little bit of work. And it sits here in front of us, and I can just go through some of the things that we found on the engine, probably that I would look to check for. Basically going back to telling us the story of what we found, like the oil leak. So the big oil leak that we found running down what looked like it could have been from the back rear main oil seal on the back of the engine that sits here or possibly from the gearbox, was actually just the tappet cover. Okay.
Which is good news.
It's very good news, but we're still going to change that seal because we've already got everything out, and it's such a short change when you do a gearbox and we take the flywheel off and we send it to an engineering firm and we machine the flywheel before we fit the new clutch. And that's something people don't always do. Take a worn flywheel which possibly even has heat spots on it. In the worst case scenario, sometimes they have cracks from heat and you can see a blue discoloration on the flywheel. So it's always worth taking the flywheel off, machine it down, they surface grind it, check the rear main oil seal and change it.
So if I may just go back a little bit, you decided to take the engine out because the gearbox was going to come out because of the problem we had discovered. Would you have normally taken the engine out in a vehicle like this? And at what point would you say, no, it's not worth taking the engine out, given the fact that we have to do the engine, the mounts, gearbox mounts as well? So
it's not necessary to take the engine out in many cases because it's a lot of extra work, a lot of extra cost. But in this scenario, we are changing the radiator and we're changing the air conditioning condenser. So from our inspection, we saw that both of those are compromised and we've taken those out. The gearbox is out and we're going to change the gearbox, the engine mountings. And you'll see from one of the mountings that you can see signs of wear. But a lot of that work can be done with the engine in place. It just can be left there. It's much easier to not create extra work and extra cost if you don't need to.
Okay, so you're saying that there is a point where you realized that actually taking the engine out was actually going to save money because it's now going to be easier working on the engine with it out, which is going to save a little bit of money. But the point is that you had to make the call in the best interest of the project, money being one of those interests, it has to be.
Has to be, yeah.
That to take the motor out was actually the best course of action. Because to be honest with you, I walked in here this morning and I looked and thought, ooh, it looks bad.
It looks bad.
You've literally dismantled the car. Yeah. So, but you're saying actually we reached the point where this was going to be a better option.
You know, when you're trying to do work on the engine and change stuff, and you're lying underneath the car trying to change a seal and you're trying to do work on the front, this is going to be the best position where you know you can put stuff back on the engine easily. Now, you know, you can do it all in situ. You absolutely can. If we weren't changing our engine mounts and we weren't taking the radiator and the air conditioning condenser out, the engine would still be in your car. Okay. And you probably would have been happier this morning when you walked in because I didn't tell you we were taking it out.
You didn't.
Anyway, so what we looked at here, of course, seals are a thing that wear a lot, okay? And when we're doing bits off the front, which is the timing belt, now this engine runs with a rubber timing belt. That's something which does get changed on regular service intervals. But when I'm redoing a truck for expedition, and I don't know the history of the truck, I don't take any risks with that. So I will fit a complete timing belt kit, and Terrain Tame have supplied us the complete kit with the idler bearing, with the actual seals we need for the camshaft. But now it's important, before you just put new seals on, to actually see how worn is the shaft and what wears shafts. So if I look at the shaft over here, this is your camshaft here, okay, there is slight wear here, and if I take my finger and I rub it along, you can see there's some shiny spots there where the seals is run, okay. Now it hasn't grooved it, it's got a slight wear. We'll take that and we'll comfortably clean that up with a bit of 1200 water paper, and it's like refacing it for the new seal to run, like where we did for the clutch. Clean that up nicely, put the seal back in, a little bit of lubricant grease on there, and it'll be perfect. It will not be a problem. However, if I'd come here and there was a big groove in there, a deep groove, where you can imagine grease and dust mixing up, creating grinding paste, and I see that that's worn, that's going to tell me if I put a new seal on, there's a chance it could leak again. And we don't want that. So part of going through whatever we stripped off, be it wheel bearings, be it stub axles, is to examine what we're putting back and how good is part we're putting the seal on or the gasket on. So making sure the surface here is all true. These tappet covers that come on here, it's a plastic tappet cover. If this engine gets really hot, they can sometimes warp. And, you know, then you have an oil leak, which is you put a new gasket and it still leaks. So it's again telling us a story. So we're happy. We're going to put a new gasket. We're going to check the tappet cover to make sure that it's nice and true and flat. So when we put the new gasket on and tighten it down, it's going to seal it. New seal on the cam. Here you can see we've removed the water pump. Inside here, it's quite good actually. normally you'd find if an engine it doesn't have a lot of antifreeze, and the misconception for a lot of people is antifreeze is there to lubricate the working parts inside the cooling system, like the water pump, the seals in the water pump. It also stops corrosion, and that's really, really important. And people don't actually put enough antifreeze or change it often enough. And depending on the coldness of the climate you're going into, will vary the ratio of how much antifreeze you're putting into the system, the cooling system. So I want to make sure that every time I look in my cooling system, I can see there's antifreeze. You can measure it. There's a lot of ways of checking the concentration of antifreeze.
So I check it looking at the color of the, it must not be clear. It must be either blue or orange.
The concentration is what varies. Okay, so I normally mix a 50-50 mix. And need pure glycol antifreeze from Toyota or a really good quality make, and I'll mix it with distilled water and I'll put it into the cooling system. Okay, and I'll make sure the overflow bottle also has some antifreeze in.
Distilled water?
I use distilled water. Tap water, look, you can if you have to, but remember that's all got properties in the water. Distilled is more pure. Okay, it's not wrong, it's just one of the things I like to do. Okay, so taking the water pump off, we're changing it. Your water pump wasn't leaking, and I'm going to show you the water pump just now. There is a telltale if the water pump leaks, but it's one of the things that if this water pump fails, you really can't drive far with a water pump that's leaking, because you're compromising the cooling system in a big way. So that's one of the parts we always carry spare. And it's not the old one we've just taken off, because that eventually dries out the seal that's been worn, bits of rust collect, and you put an old one back on and very soon it's leaking again. So I'll carry another new water pump, maybe not even the same quality if I need to save a bit of money, but as long as it's a spare, which we can take with us. The best one, the best quality one, is going on the motor. Here we've taken the crank off. So the big crank pulley that sits over here, that's come off. Your timing belt sits here, and you'll see it when it all goes back on with a new timing belt and the tension and all that. Here again, I want to make sure that this actually feels good. This is brilliant. There's nothing wrong here. You can feel that there. It's lovely. It's nice and smooth.
Perfect.
So when we put a new seal on there,
yes,
that's not going to give us any problems at all where it sits. For the rest, we're changing the power steering. The power steering pump we've taken off, and that's going to be changed. We've looked at the rest of the motor. It's actually in really good condition, and we know from the records that you and I looked at that this motor has been opened, it has had work done on it. So I'm confident that when we put it back together with the new injectors, with new glow plugs, with all the auxiliaries we're putting back on, this car is going to last a long time and give you many miles of good driving.
Good. Well, that's good to know.
So we've taken the diffs out. Okay, the big thing is we've had to strip down the axles, we've taken the side shafts out. We want to actually check the condition of the diffs. With the diff in the axle, you can check for backlash. You can actually check that the amount of movement on the front flange here, to what degree it moves backwards and forwards compared to the movement inside here on the crown wheel and the pinion. So the biggest challenge you have is once you start getting a lot of play between the teeth here and the inside here, if you look in here, you've got your pinion and your crown wheel here, and where these teeth mesh, you get play. And to set up the diff properly with the bearings that are sitting carrying the actual crown wheel and pinion, it's important that all this is set up in tolerance. And as wear happens and as people drive and over the years of wear and tear, the bearings wear, the teeth can wear, and the distances between the teeth can also start increasing, and that's when you get play on the diffs and backlash on the diff. So by taking the diffs out, we're giving ourselves the confidence as we can actually visually look at these teeth. We can look at the wear patterns on the teeth, we can look at the coloration. We're looking for problems. Is there a tooth that's chipped or broken? There's no distinctive wear patterns, and you'll see wear patterns on the crown wheel when it starts getting a lot shinier, and you can see it's almost, the teeth are quite worn and sometimes even rounded edges. So in this particular instance, I'm not even going to strip these diffs. The bearings feel good. We could strip them down, we could put new bearings in, but the condition is telling me, actually I'm prepared to take the chance on these because they are in such good condition, looking at the actual teeth and everything, that's worth taking a chance on. If we found that there was a lot of play here, the seal was leaking, we could say, okay, look, let's change all this. Let's strip them down. Let's do the seals. Let's do everything. So here's where you've got to make a call, because there has been wear, okay, on these diffs, but because we haven't got any potential problems on them, let them be. The worst case scenario is that at some stage you might find a seal starts leaking here, okay? It's not a difficult job to change that. You don't have to take the whole diff out. You can change the seal. But for the sake of what we're trying to balance the project out and what we spend and what we do, we're not trying to rebuild the car in its entirety. We're trying to basically take this vehicle and put it back to a very good condition on the road, which is going to be safe, reliable, and give really good miles on overland expedition travel. The drive shafts are a different story. We've taken those out. We're replacing the front drive shafts, and those do take a lot more wear. So these come out, we clean them up, we check everything, put a new gasket on, clean the inside of the diff housings properly so that we can take any sludge or any metal particles that are lying in the diff that you don't always get to. So it's important to wash the diff casings out properly before we put these back in. So when we put the new oil in, it's now in a nice clean environment, and it actually works and actually prolongs the life. You know, oils are the lifeblood. It's like the blood in our veins. It's the lifeblood of us. It's the lifeblood of the car. So of course, oils are not expensive. Good quality oils are essential, and change them often.
So looking closely at these hubs and bearings is just taking me back to my Range Rover. The last time I did this kind of work was with a vehicle that was also close to 20 years old. It didn't have close to this mileage on it, and I ran bearings and replaced hubs and hub seals and all this kind of thing. So there's a certain, there's a bit of, I'm starting to remember things that I haven't had to deal with in a very long time.
The used parts table will slowly fill as our new parts table empties. I'm looking forward to how this will look in a few days' time.
Terrain tamer to have a
So they have supplied us with a belt kit.
Yeah, it's really nice the way they do it, because the bags are really useful. For one, I really like these. They go into my spares kit. And what happens with belts, Andrew, is you find that belts get hard, and they do sometimes crack. If you had to look in there, you'd often see that you get cracks appearing, and then the belt is actually really quite tired. What I found with belts is that in the ambient temperature, where it's really hot in our climates in Africa, it's dusty, it's really hot, under bonnet temperatures are hotter, belts actually shorten their lifespan. And people will look at a belt and they'll say, well, they look all right, they're not pretty much frayed up. So now what happens is the people, when the belt slips, and you hear it when you start the car, the tendency is just to adjust the alternator or the air contentioner. And all that does is just put more wear on the bearings. The belt's not gripping because it's hard and it's tired and it's old. It's much better to take a new set of belts, and actually they're softer, you can feel they're a little bit more grippy. Put the belt on. The best way to test the belt between the two pulleys is to just, once you've tensioned it up, try and twist it 90 degrees. You shouldn't get it really much past 90 degrees. Over tensioning a belt does more harm than under tensioning it. So you don't want a belt to slip, but you don't want it too tight, because that actually puts a lot of premature wear on bearings in the alternator and the air conditioning. So I always change belts. I always carry a spare set of belts. The old ones are fine. They're not completely finished.
Good for spares.
You want to carry them as spares, save the money.
Yes.
So there we go.
I actually ran a number of belts on my 105, and I always had spares, so we're going to hold on to a nice set of spares for.
And as I think you mentioned to me, you had a problem because the pitch of the belt wasn't correct. It's important to check.
It was a pirate part. Even though it was labeled Toyota, it turned out to be a pirate part. And the profile, and these come in a matched pair, right?
They do.
Okay, so there was a matched pair, wrong profile, and they just started breaking over a very, very short time. So I learned something about that too. So while they're busy doing that, it's a slightly overwhelming. I'm just so glad these guys are just taking it and just. They obviously know exactly what they're doing, which is just as well, because I'm kind of a lot more is being done to the vehicle than I thought would need to be done. Is this typical? Probably.
It's workshop day 3 of my rebuild of a 20-year-old Landcruiser 105 wagon. Work is progressing flat out. Today I'm going to focus on the engine. We have just 4 more days to complete this restoration before I drive it 1,000 miles upcountry. With the engine compression tests complete, Snymans 4-wheel drive will now reassemble the engine, replacing some components and checking others. But what should be replaced and what should we look for? I'll leave that for Paul to explain.
You know, we took the engine out and we're changing the engine mounts. It's something that people don't always look at because they're quite difficult to check the engine mounts. You know, you've really got to get in there and shine in. So when I look at the old engine mount, you can actually look and see how the rubber is bonded to the metal on top, metal underneath, where it gets bolted. And you can see where it's starting to actually fail on the engine mount. Now, if we look at a brand new one, you can see, you know, it's absolutely what it needs. This is all rubber, and of course you've got the metal plates changing.
So if they were in reasonably good condition, you wouldn't bother?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't bother changing?
If I saw,
but you would definitely inspect them?
If I didn't see that, and I saw maybe it would just showed a bit of stress line, I actually I'd be okay. You know, they're not failing. It's when I see that point and I'm going, you know what, we can't risk that. Now, there's always a fine line with mountings, because mountings, imagine how old this probably has never been changed in the life of the car.
Yes.
But we're trying to make a call on what we absolutely need to change and what we don't. And there's a certain amount of, how would I say, experience through years of doing stuff where you go, you know what, I know these are probably going to still be okay. There's a chance it could shear. But that's a risk I'm prepared to take when I'm rebuilding the car, as opposed to a part like, let's say, a water pump, which we're absolutely going to change. Okay, so let me show you the water pumps. So we took this water pump off. It's not leaking, okay. So at the end of the day, I was looking for, normally you'll find the water pump will have it'll start leaking at the bottom of the pump. Some of them have a leak hole there, possibly there. And if you note the impeller, this is actually a plastic impeller. On a couple of occasions, I've actually found that these impellers have actually they're not turning with the shaft. So we found a problem on the cooling system, cars running hot. Not often, but I have found that, so I'm not a great fan of the plastic impellers, because when I look at the brand new water pump, I've actually got a cast impeller. And you can see, if you're looking between the two, this definitely in my mind feels stronger, more substantial, and a really good quality water pump. And this is the water pump that Terrain Tamer have supplied us, and we're going to fit it. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's really good.
Given the fact that costs are, I'm aware of costs, I understand that a water pump can deteriorate just by, so is this good enough as a spare part?
So
because it would only be used, it's perfectly good, and it would only be used really in an emergency if this one failed. Is that still worth keeping as a spare part in the car?
In the case of a water pump, I never take an old one.
Okay.
And the reason I don't is because invariably when you're on expedition, you're a long way from anywhere. Now, if I take this water pump and it's had some corrosion in it from the water and the antifreeze, and you can see corrosion, wear and tear. If I take this water pump and I put it in, take all the trouble to take it out and fit it in, and within a few kilometers it starts leaking, I've carried this for nothing. I'd rather go and buy an aftermarket pump, which isn't the quality of what we've got on the table here, a lot cheaper, which would be much better if I needed to use it.
So you're saying water pumps are one of those things where, no, you
fit new
and carry a new one. That's all.
A really good quality new one to the car.
Right.
And if you're trying to save some costs, you carry a lesser quality
spare. But that's not the case with belts, because these belts are reasonable. They'll be fine for spares. Okay.
The cam belt, we've changed the cam belt. Now the cam belt gets changed normally every 100,000 kilometers.
Yes.
It's very difficult to tell a cam belt, but I won't take the risk. If this has been changed 50,000 kilometers ago, we're trying to do a baseline on this car of critical components. If this belt snaps or fails, your engine's damaged. So why risk it? So I want to know for you.
You don't know if that was changed.
I don't know.
75,000 Ks or 2,000, you don't know.
I don't know.
You cannot change.
You can tell from the belt to a point, but
to a point,
it's still, the belt's quite hard, and again, you know, in conditions here, the belt's
but good for a spare.
Yeah, and you know, if you had to use this as a spare, you've probably done a lot of damage.
You've
to
probably
the car.
broken it and you've damaged it. You've probably had a valve.
You don't have to. So I
damage,
wouldn't
so-
carry this as a spare because I'm trying to limit the amount of spares I carry. And I do
Okay.
believe that when someone asks me, says, Paul, what spares do I take? I'm more mindful to say, what have you done to your car? What have you fitted to the car? What
Yes.
how have you prepared your car? And then I'll tell you what spares to take. Because more often than not, people are carrying spares for the sake of carrying spares, but they actually haven't changed it on the car. They want to carry it what if. Put it on the car. One reason you know it's the right part. You're mitigating the chance of you having to make that repair on the road, which is really important. And do I need a spare cam belt? No. Do I take spare alternator belts? Yes, because they can give a problem. You might have one that fails. They're easy to change.
So, but there is a chance that you would, during a daily inspection for some reason, see that you've got some fraying on your, but you can't see it because it's hidden. So just to point out that this belt, because it's got teeth in it, okay, it means that it is a timing critical belt, and this particular one runs from the crankshaft runs the camshaft. If it breaks, the valves stop lifting and the piston can hit the valve.
Yeah,
in this motor, does it hit the valve?
Yeah, it will do damage.
It does.
It will
Okay.
do damage.
Okay.
So this is your injector pump and your crankshaft and
Yes.
that's all timed up.
Yes.
So it's very important that this doesn't fail. So we make sure we put the best quality belt in, but we also change the tension. We also change any components related to this.
Okay.
So that the complete system is renewed. I don't take a shortcut by going, I'll just change the belt and leave the tensioner, because that's also done its life. And I don't want the tensioner to fail and then the belt to fail. So
that's actually a very, very good lesson to learn, because now if you do get premature wear on this, it might not be the belt's fault at all. It could be the tensioner.
Could be the tensioner,
So if you just replace the belt, it'll just happen all over again.
It could happen again. And I
could
think
happen
that's
again.
the thing to do is, here's the tensioner, okay? Now if I had to feel this tensioner and I look at it and it runs against the belt, it probably feels fine. And if you had to say to me, Paul, would you take a chance on this? If I had to, it'd probably last another 100,000. Do I need to take the chance? No, because only a good workshop, this is work that gets done in a workshop with someone who really knows what they're doing to set it up properly. This is not side of the road, fix it. Okay, so you want to make sure that this is done properly in a workshop. They've changed it with good quality parts.
Yes.
Okay, and you know it's done properly. The bolts are tightened up and they're all properly done, so you don't have this failure. So that done. We've talked about the water pump. Let's just go through the water system as well, because you spoke about a thermostat. Now, fitting thermostats, this has got a rubber which peels off, and there's the old thermostat. Could you use this again? Yeah, you could. There's a bit too much sealant being put on here, so the sealant, the little bit's gone inside, but that's fine. This is perfectly good if you wanted to carry it as a spare. Do I carry thermostats? I don't actually carry a thermostat as a spare, and I'll tell you why I don't, because if I had a problem with a cooling system, I will always change it for new. So if I'm going to, it's not an expensive part, I'm changing the water pump, put a brand new, good quality thermostat in with the new rubber and all that. If my thermostat fails, I can actually cut it apart and I can just leave the outer ring and take the middle bit out and
you will
run a
still
bit cooler. I will still
You'll get
there.
water flow. And
So
it
what
will
I'm
still
trying to
cool in.
say is
Yes.
that you can carry all these bits and you add more and more weight to your car. Okay, can I improvise on something that is not mission critical to get me to the next point? And if I can do that, then I'm actually going to try not to carry this part.
Oh, and actually talking about the water cooling system, hoses, cooling
Right.
hoses, and I see here that they've
Well, this
okay,
is the
replacement.
this is the thermostat housing here.
housing, yes.
Okay, we can clean this up. The most important is that the face of this is not corroded. So you'll see there's
So
the
you get a
white
good- so you get a
corrosion
seal
there.
with the gasket, and there is a bit of corrosion in there.
Well, there's a bit of there's a bit
not
of rust
severe,
in there.
though.
It's not severe at all. So
Yeah.
what I'm looking for on these, when I'm looking at these, I'm looking to see that this face hasn't been corroded. This is an aluminium, okay, and of course the corrosion can eat into aluminium. Aluminium can corrode, especially water and all that. And you'll see the white corrosion on there. So what I would do is I'd take a sanding block, a bit of sandpaper, I'd face this up, and I'd check it. If I was worried in any way, I'd just check it across with a little straight rule, and I'm looking as it actually is fine. We could use this, nothing wrong with this. Okay, this is the critical part here where the pipe goes on, because these also get corroded underneath this. So you've got a clamp on here and you get corrosion building up the hose under the hose here. So I do carry hoses because hoses, it's very difficult for us to tell how good this hose is.
From the outside, very difficult.
You can normally take a hose and you can squash it, and if you hear a crunching sound, then it means that the inside has probably got a lot of corrosion, and that's actually lined and coated the inside of the hoses. It's one way to actually just take a hose, and if you can feel it's like crunching, change all your hoses, critical. I would absolutely change all the hoses because I don't want to risk a hose failing on me. Now, a hose can split in any number of ways. It can normally leak from somewhere like here where the clamp is not holding it properly. These are pretty good clamps. These are Toyota genuine clamps. More often than not, when we take these off, we use a normal Jubilee clip type clamp. Very important before you put the hose on to make sure you've cleaned the area where the hose is going to go on, so that actually the hose has a good chance of sealing properly. And then put a clamp on which is sitting nicely so it actually seals it properly over the edge. Because if you look here on the new one, you've actually got an edge where this is going to seal. So I actually want to make sure my clamp is sitting so it actually seals it nicely. Okay, and to make sure that the surface is nice and clean.
Nice and clean, and the clamp is inside.
And this is where it'll corrode through. It'll have corrosion pit marks in here,
yes.
And that's where your leaks. And any leak in a water system is going to compromise the cooling system. You know, this system, as the water keeps going down and you find the temperature starts creeping up, you've got to, you know, we don't always have alarms and warning systems, which you can fit. You can actually fit in the terrain tamer radiator, which they don't do for this car, sadly. On the newer ones, they actually have a low water sensor that you can fit to the radiator. It's a brilliant idea, but we don't have that. So we're going to make extra care that these are absolutely in good condition, or face them up. Now have a look here. This is a good example of what I'm talking about. Okay, you can see there's quite a lot of corrosion on here.
So this is what part of...
this is also part of the cooling system.
Yes, but
okay.
where
this goes onto the cylinder
radiator?
head. No, onto the cylinder head.
from the cylinder head. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So you'll see here that there's a lot of corrosion, and you can see there it started to dig in. Okay, and again, it would be clean this up completely, and then examine it and see how good it is. But you can also see inside here. And if you said to me, would I reuse this? Well, we've actually got a spare one, but if I cleaned this all up and took a bit of time to clean it, there's nothing wrong with using it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As long as this surface is faced up properly,
yes,
and as long as this can make a good
clean,
seal,
yes.
it's absolutely good.
Okay.
You know? So this is definitely a hose to change. This little hose. It looks like they blanked this off for a reason. So
do we have a replacement part from that, or are we
let
going
me show
to...
you the hoses that we've been given. And then this is probably one of the items I love most, is because sourcing all these hoses is really painful when you've got to go and look up and find out which parts where and what they're doing. Here we've got a whole kit.
So that is
This
what
is
it
radiator.
called? Radiator hose kit.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a complete hose kit. These small hoses are always painful to get, but we've got them. We've got new radiator hoses.
And
We've got really good quality stainless steel
everything
clamps.
is there.
Really nice. And they've done the same for the heater system. Beautiful. So all our little heater hoses can be changed. And this is often the case, you know. Heater systems in our warm country don't get used as often as they do maybe overseas. Okay, so coolant and water, you get corrosion and sits, and you know, pipes get worn out, and these are the ones I often grab and I feel a crunchy bit inside. So you know, you can bypass a heater system in the car if it leaks. If you find your footwell suddenly wet, you probably find the heater system in the car. It's like a small radiator is leaking, and if that's the case, we can bypass it. So you know, in sort of the training we do in bush mechanics training is a lot about, if this happens, can I bypass it? Because the aim of the repair is to get me to the next place. And I've bypassed heaters and driven an entire expedition. I don't need a heater, put a jacket on. But there's certain places and things you can't bypass and make a plan. But that's what we aim to do, is we're replacing the parts to give us the best chance of no problems on the trip, to mitigate the problems we could possibly have, and we don't want to incur those problems. So that works. And if we do incur problems, we need to know how we can get around those problems. Like a leak, you can keep topping up and you can keep driving as long as you ascertain how much distance you've got to drive before you need more oil. It's just an example of what you do. So a lot of that, for me, is very important for people to understand. They don't need to be mechanics when they're going on expedition. They need to know how to check cars with a good understanding of what the components are and a good list to work from. And that way they can work through, you know, problems and problem solving and sorting out issues. Bush mechanic fixing.
Of all the parts we've come across so far, the ones that are in the worst condition by far are the radiators. I mean, look at this. This is the air conditioning condenser. And now if I take my finger and I run it, I'm putting no pressure on that at all, and it is disintegrating. It is absolutely rotten.
So,
is that normal for a 20-year-old vehicle, do you think?
You know, it depends on how it's been looked after. It depends on what environment it's been in. This has been distorted, so someone's dropped something on it. It still worked because before we stripped everything out, we gassed up the air conditioning to check it and make sure it worked. So this actually still worked. But is it efficient? No. And think of all the air that's trying to go through here to go then through the radiator to cool the engine. So you can imagine how you're starting to compromise. What I found that where people do compromise is when you're going to go through rivers and water, people get lazy. It takes nothing to take a ground sheet and wrap the front of your car over with a bit of tarpaulin or a wading sheet. So that when you do decide to drive through the river that's a bit silty and that, you're not going to push all that silt through your air conditioning condenser and then into your radiator. These are very fine. So it doesn't take much to start blocking these up with a bit of mud and silt. And then this sits trapped in here. Very difficult to wash out and clean out. You then reduce the ability to cool your engine quite considerably, let alone the air conditioning. So you're now making all the components work a lot harder just because you were lazy.
So just to clarify things, the main engine coolant radiator sits here and the air conditioning condenser sits in front of it. So the air has got to pass through this before it cools the engine. And it's not passing through this, the engine's not going to get cooled properly.
So you and I have done tests before where people put big spotlights here. And that also hampers and we've measured that to actually prove how that makes a difference. Well, you can imagine what this does, and if you look at the bottom row here, this is all, it gets mud trapped in there, and of course then it starts rotting it out. And the worst thing you can do with this, and you can see that starting to fall apart. Yeah, it's just falling apart.
Look at that, look at that, unbelievable.
Okay.
I've never seen one this bad, ever.
So that's the real problem. So we are absolutely, the challenge we've got is, I'm not sure they still make these, or we can get them very easily, so we might have to have something made up. We might have to look for a good second-hand one. Nothing wrong with a good second-hand part. People always cringe about good second-hand parts. As long as it's in good condition and it serves the purpose, why not?
I mean, you can actually have the center core replaced, which is what we're doing on our principal engine radiator. Not so. We're having
it's very
more difficult.
Yeah. And if I didn't have to, I would try not to, because it's a very intricate part of how it's made up.
Yes,
it's a factory made up. So invariably, we try and look for something that's available, or something we can make it work. But your radiator, your radiator cores also had problems with the fins.
Yes, it did.
They were also quite worn and damaged. So the radiator, because the radiator is not standard on this car, this radiator was made up. Someone built this radiator, and then they made the top and bottom tanks, which are brass tanks. Now, a lot of these cars come with plastic tanks on the radiators, and I find the plastic tank, while it's good and it's efficient, if you have to make a repair to that, it's much more difficult. So, the aluminium radiators as well, they are fantastic. They're really much more efficient at cooling. But to repair those in the bush is more difficult. A specialist welder or specialist, ways of doing it. I've had in the past where if we've had a fan go into the grill, now you can imagine your radiator, and then a fan cuts through some of these tubes. And the only way we were able to make it work is we had to take a pair of pliers and we had to bend these tubes back and block off a number of these tubes so that we could still use the radiator. And that's kind of make a plan. So invariably, if you look after and make sure that this is in good condition, the radiator is in good condition, what damages the radiator is grass seeds going in that choke up these fins that are difficult to get out, mud going through, driving into water with a lot of speed where the water gets pushed through the radiator and air conditioning condenser. People taking pressure washers and washing your car with no sense of how fragile these are, and high pressure can actually damage these. So I'm always, when someone starts to wash my car with a high pressure gun, I'm going, whoa, hang on, let's turn it down or step back, because I know how fragile this is.
Tarentum have supplied us one of their, it's a 170 amp alternator.
Beautiful.
Well,
Beautiful.
that is a 70 amp, so it's going to give me an extra 100 amps if I need it.
Well, you know,
But would you normally change and
yes, I do. I like to upgrade the alternators. I like to get the extra power. You know, considering this has probably run its life. Okay, I could have this reconditioned, but it's only 70 amps. Okay, and it's what voltage output this alternator gives that's really critical. But the amperage, the extra 100 amps, the ability to deliver the amperage is really going to be beneficial to you. So, brand new alternator. You can see it's bigger. It's beautifully built. You know. Really nice, and 170 amps. So the question is, when we replace this, are you going to take the old one? And I'm going to say no, because this is not going to be mission critical if it fails. If an alternator fails, most cars that we build on Expedition have 3 ways of charging the battery: solar panel, 220 volts, and the alternator. With a brand new alternator, there's less chance of something to go wrong. If I take an old alternator and I basically recondition it, they're taking a lot of the components that are quite old, changing bearings, rectifiers, whatever they need to change on it. It's still an old unit, so you're still running a risk of it being repaired. But with a brand new one, you've actually taken that risk down to probably 0. And this is a heavy lump to put in my car and carry. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce weight, what we're carrying, and the spares we carry. And one big payload is spares. Well, it's not so big if you build a car with the new parts and try and reduce what you carry. So that's my ethos, is basically fit the new alternator, fit the new parts, and reduce what you take, to the point that the parts you carry are actually going to be able to get you to a place where if you didn't have them, you couldn't make it, like a water pump.
so the weight, because the point is, of course, here is the extra weight of carrying all the spares adds to the chance, because the vehicle is working harder in everything it does, so it's adding to the chance to a degree of failures and breakdowns.
Well, you know,
So there has to be some kind of balance.
There's a balance. That's well put. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance out what you take. So with equipment, with everything that you put in the vehicle to go overland, it's about taking less equipment and more knowledge. I always say that to people. Think about it. If you can take more knowledge on how to fix something, how to get around a problem, how to prepare yourself. So if we didn't have an alternator and I needed to charge the main battery, could I connect my solar panel so it just charges my main battery? I might have to wait a few hours, but I could actually put a solar panel, whether it's a fold-up solar panel, I could charge the main battery. Or I could use a mains battery, a mains charger, because it's always important that you carry a mains charger on long trips so you can refresh your batteries and top them up full, where the alternator does a good job of charging it up with DC to DC systems, but a mains charger is probably the best way you can ever charge a battery. So
Day 4 of the build. I like starting to use the word restoration, because we are actually restoring this vehicle and taking it from old to new. Day 4, waiting for the gearbox to arrive. Transfer box has been sorted, gearbox sorted, waiting for that. Manifold, waiting for that. Radiator replacement, radiators for both the air conditioner condenser and the engine cooling radiator, all on their way now. But a lot of work has been done on the transmission, brakes, suspension already.
So Andrew, we found the problem on your gearbox. That's your reverse gear. And unfortunately the reverse gear is not looking too healthy, because as you can see, all the teeth have been broken off. That's how a tooth should look, and this is what's left of the reverse gear.
That is your reverse gear, and usually on these gearboxes, when you run start the car in reverse, that happens.
When you do a push start in reverse,
Yes. Yeah.
It just knocks the teeth off.
it just
Yeah.
because they're not designed to go backwards
Yes.
in the opposite direction.
Well, you're
what-
dropping the clutch. You're doing a shock load on the gears.
Right.
So you put
Which
the
is
clutch
fast
in.
in first and second, but a reverse
Stronger.
is very weak.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So they do that. Drop the clutch. Never start a car in reverse.
You hear that? Never start a car in reverse, particularly if it's, well, any car.
Because you have to then put a phone inside it.
So now, okay, so what's the prognosis? Can we get is it a spare part? Is it a major build? Is it just one component, or?
It's a small part. You know yourself how much you use your reverse, so we can actually just put you a second-hand part, and you will be.
Take it out. Let's just take it out. It doesn't need reverse.
No, I'm going to need reverse.
You don't need reverse.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, second-hand part. Yeah.
Oh, look what's come in.
That's my pride and joy.
Your pride and joy.
That keeps me going in this business.
I will do a report later in this series about Hubert's 40 series Landcruiser rebuilds.
So Andrew, here we've got the critical component of the front axle. And you've got the axle casing here, 2 small bearings, and they really are very small bearings. And the whole wheel pivots on these 2 bearings here. And you've got a set of seals that actually stop the grease that holds the CV joint and the drive shaft, which sits in here, coming out when the wheel turns left and right. And then you've got a seal inside there, this little seal there, which stops this grease going into the oil of the axle. So when you get failure of this seal here, this little seal here, and this dark grease starts creeping through there and actually going into the axle casing, it's really difficult to tell. So what I've always advised people going on overland expedition is, when you come and do your service every 5,000 Ks, check the color of the front oil in the axle. If you find the front oil's actually gone a little bit gray, then it's telling you that actually this grease in here, which you can't see, has gone through that seal and actually mixed with that oil. The problem with it mixing is that now you've actually taken oil and grease and mixed it, and it's not the right lubrication for the differentials. And when I showed you the nice teeth on the differential, it looked really in good condition. This grease and oil actually deteriorates that, takes off what we call the case hardening on those teeth. So it's important that the system, where the grease stays here to lubricate the CV joint, stays this side of that seal, and the oil stays that side of the seal, and these components work separately. Then from here, to make the wheel turn, we've got a spindle, and there's some parts missing here because they all fit together. What I want to show you is the bearings. So here we've got the spindle. These are the 2 bearings where the actual hub, where we bolt the wheel, runs on it. And the critical points for us here are to check bearings. Now this, people don't do often enough. I've often found that, when you're driving on expedition, you've got a really heavy vehicle. You've loaded it in a heavy capacity. You're putting a lot of load on the wheel bearings. So part of the service regime, which needs to be done more often than if you didn't load the vehicle for expedition, and that's why a Toyota service regime for the factory is slightly different to overland and how I've trained people, because you're putting a lot more stress on things and components like bearings, and you're driving on some really harsh roads. So I want people to check bearings more often, and what we're doing here is we're actually going to replace your bearings. So you'd look at it and you say, when do I change a bearing, and should I change a bearing? Now, bearings aren't particularly expensive, and I would actually just go ahead and spend the money and change the bearings. But if I look at these bearings here, and you can see in the light there's a brown tinge on what they call the rollers, these little rollers. Okay, now that brown is a sign of heat. So the lubrication's broken down, which means the grease is either contaminated or it's actually got too little grease in there, and this is run hot. And so these start wearing. And then the other problem you have is on what's called the stub axle, where these sit. You've got the surface where this bearing has to slide on. Now I take this bearing and I slide it on, and it needs to go on nice and true, otherwise it doesn't just slide on. There we are. So this has got, if I can feel it's on. It's not a lot of movement there. If I take the top one and if I look at this, and if I take my finger, there's actually a ridge there. And if I turn it round, there isn't a ridge there. So the wear on this side is more accentuated than the top. So when I take this bearing, and what I'm trying to make sure is that the inside race here doesn't have any movement. The movement needs to be like that. The outside part moving, and this inside needs to be fixed and sit so it doesn't move. So now I put this on, and if I just take that and I can actually move that, not the outside, I'm actually feeling movement on this, And the reason I'm feeling movement on there is because there is a shoulder here that's worn. So I wouldn't reuse this stub axle. If I was in a place where this was really good and I didn't have that sort of wear all around, I could clean it up, I could put a bit of bearing lock, I could put this back together confidently knowing we could reuse this part. An expensive part to change. The other part to check is that you've got a bronze bush and you've got a needle roller bearing, and we have got, I'm going to show you quickly the difference between a new bearing. Okay, and then let's look at that one. So there's our nice new shiny bearing, and there's the old one. So by taking your bearings and stripping down the wheel bearings on a regular basis, and people say, well, how often is regular? On an expedition, probably every 20,000 kilometers. And I'd regulate that by testing play-on bearings, which I would take up play-on bearings at a normal service interval of every 5,000 kilometers. Or also if I've driven through a lot of water. Because the biggest problem people have is you drive through water, you've got a seal which is keeping the grease out on the inside of the bearing and the dust from the outside, and as you go through water you cool everything down, quenching it, and you can often suck a bit of moisture through past the seal with dirt, with mud, with grit. So a river which has got a lot of silt in it, now you're creating a grinding paste, and you can see what ends up happening is that creeps in, and then of course you can get excessive wear coming through. So bottom line, you want to make sure that these components are not overly worn. Spend the money on new bearings. If the bearing still looked nice like this, I wouldn't change it. I'd actually take it and I would just re-grease it.
So those bearings would be ideal for spares.
So what you'll notice here, this is what we recognize as a brake disc. The wheel goes on here, and as you can see, that's where the bearing sits, and then we've got the stub axle which goes in. Okay. If you take a bearing out, a bearing is a matched pair. So these two, once they start wearing in, become a matched pair. If you said to me, Paul, would you take this as a spare set of bearings? I knock out the shell, that's the shell that sits in there. I knock that out and I keep them together. I don't mix them up, because once you mix them up, you can't take a worn bearing with a different shell. You know, this has got a, they're nice, these two are happy together. Okay, they've got a nice relationship. They've worked together for a long time. So now you want to take someone else, like a marriage, you know, you don't just swap around. It's important that you keep the shell and the actual bearing together if you're going to take it as a spare. And yes, take a set of bearings as spare, because you never know how a bearing could give a problem. And again, if I'm taking seals, I always take new seals. I never compromise on seals. We use the best seals we can buy.
So you're saying if I'm taking the bearings as spares, I must keep them matched with all of the components that were taken out. We're going to put them in a place where they're all together. So if I have to replace a bearing, I take the whole lot and replace the whole lot. Is that what you're saying?
So what I'm saying is this is the component you keep together. So this is the old bearing from here.
Yes.
Okay. Here's a brand new one. If I take this one out and I'm going to take this as a spare, I need to take its partner, the shell, out. And I keep those
the shell
together.
Is still in there.
The shell is still in there. We knock it out. We take a shaft through there and we tap it out, and then you end up with this piece. And then I take the two together and I put a zip tie around so that I don't mix them up. It's really important. If it's a brand new one in a box, it's fine. It's in a box, it's matched. So any spare you're taking, especially bearings, and I'm going to reuse them, take them together, put a zip tie around, and you've got a spare set of bearings.
I didn't know that. Oh, yeah.
Gaskets, very important to take new gaskets, brand new seals. And I take enough seals to do a full bearing service on the car if I'm going on a trip. So the seal that sits in here, I'm going to get one of those. So here's the new seal. The seal actually fits in to the hub over here. And these I carry a full set, because if I'm going to service the bearings, I can pull the bearings apart, where I'm actually just taking the bearing out, clean it, wash it, put new grease in, and then I'll put a brand new seal, put it in, and make sure I've got a good quality seal. Now, this is an amazing seal. This is the new seal that Terrain Tame have supplied us. And what I see is that it's like a seal within a seal. And if you look in there, it's actually ridged. And then you've got the outer seal. So normally a seal will have one lip. And the way they've designed these, well, they just look much more efficient and much less chance of dirt and grit getting in. Because that's the biggest problem with a seal. You can imagine, there's your seal, here's your stub axle, and dirt and mud and all this come up, and this is where the seal will run, come up against here. And what you're trying to do with the seal is you're trying to make sure that the water and the dust and the mud stays on one side of the seal, away from the grease and the bearing, so that we don't actually contaminate our grease. Grease breaks down and oil breaks down because of the impurities that get mixed into it. The properties of most grease, good quality grease, and it's important to use a proper, really good quality grease. Generally they'll last for a very, very long time, but once they get contaminants in, that's what tends to make a grease or an oil fail. Beautiful, beautiful, look at this. Wow. So here is our brand new stub axle. When I compare the two, you can actually see the wear marks and no wear marks. And of course the second bearing sits there, and the seal sits there, and the seal sits there. Now if I rub my finger on here, there's actually a groove there. Okay, and it's for the new seal to sit on there, there's always a chance that seal's not going to seal as well, because the lip has actually made a groove from all the dust and mud and oil, and that's critical that that actually seals there. Sometimes you can get away with cleaning it up with a bit of water paper, and you can make sure that it all works and the ridges aren't there, then it's still okay. In our case, we're absolutely changing this, and it's something I wouldn't compromise on, because once a bearing has a little bit of play carrying all the way to the car, it can compromise the bearing. So you want to minimize any potential play on anything. Any movement causes damage. So here we've got our new one. There's the new bronze bush, there's a new roller bearing in there. Very nice. And so what Terrain Tamer have done as well, which I really love, because it's one thing now, we have a kit here to rebuild this whole setup and make sure that the new stub axle all goes together. And this kit that they put together comes with everything. Okay, we've got small bearings which we swap in here. So these little bearings I change often, because I find that, you know, what ends up happening here, these bearings start, if I clean that out, you'll find you can see there's little ridges. So what happens is this, you'll find the steering, the bearing itself gets knocked out, as we call it, and those little rollers that we have here, they actually start making ridges on the little bearing there, and it's really not good, and that's why these are not expensive. People don't always change them, but that sits in there, a little bearing. And of course on a lot of roads there isn't a lot of movement when you're steering, and most of the time you're driving with the wheel straight, and the bash, and if they're not adjusted properly, eventually they make little grooves in here. And of course the movement is then restricted, and of course your power steering is doing all the work, but actually if I run my hand in there I can feel ever so slightly, and you can see it, there's little shiny edges in there. Okay, so don't compromise. What's really special about this is I don't buy these all separate, I buy the complete kit. The seal, this little seal that sits in there, they've also changed the design of the seal. It's actually got a nice lip, double lip system in here. It allows for the shaft, it goes in there to keep the oil and grease separate. We've got these are the old style seals. Now you're going to compare this seal, okay, which is also a very good seal, and you've got a newer style seal here as well. So you can see there is a difference. There's a new design on the seals. So perfect little kit. It's got this complete set inside here. So here we've got gaskets, we've got seals, the rubber seals, and these, and the felt seals. So it's just beautifully prepared. The shims to shim it, so we've got it properly tensioned up. This whole kit is what is used to build this whole knuckle setup with the stub axle and the brake disc. So it all comes together. It's just a complete setup, really nicely done. And I know that the quality of the gasket paper that they use is also very good quality. You do get kits like this that can be quite cheap and inexpensive, and invariably you go to a lot of time and effort and money to rebuild the front axle knuckle, and you use a cheap a cheaper kit, and then within a few thousand Ks you start finding that they're leaking, or they're not really holding their way. And it's just, don't compromise on it. Use good quality parts. It really does pay in the long run. So now for the rear. We've got a complete axle here. The only difference with the Landcruiser axle is that actually it doesn't have a bolt-off stub axle like we had on the front. It's actually part of the axle. In my mind, it's actually, I think Land Rover had a much better design because you could bolt these stub axles off and you can replace them. So it's important on this that you make sure the wear is not like we found on the front stub axle, which is also worn. This is actually still in very good condition. If I feel on the edges, on the areas where the bearing is going to sit, there's a little bit of coloration, but there's no ridge, and that's what I'm really, there's a bit of a ridge here that you can see
where the seal
sits, but it's not a deep gouge. And because we've got the new type of seal, it will actually work very well. So what's important when I run my fingers around, I just want to make sure that there's no sharp edges there and that it gets cleaned up properly. And this is where I think the difference between a workshop that actually cares. Now, you can throw bearings on and off a car in many different ways. The difference between actually preparing this properly is going to give you the longevity and less problems. So if I push a seal on here, I've already found a slight burr underneath here with my finger. And if I go and push a seal on there and I nick the seal, you won't know about it. You'll take your car, you'll drive off, and eventually you'll start seeing more grease leaking out there. And that's where the difference comes in. That's why when I'm choosing people who are going to work on my car, I want to know they're actually going to take the care to make sure this is cleaned up properly. That they understand this car is going not round the corner, around the block or the next suburb, where if there's a problem I can come back on Monday.
I mean, let me just feel that burr there. Oh yes, I can feel it. Oh, right there it is there.
Yeah. Just
so how do you find somebody who's actually going to?
So these guys in Africa, they have a unique way of wanting to care for a client, and that's the difference. I've often seen that when you do a job and you actually care about what you're doing, and you get some water.
So well, Paul goes to the nursing home to have his cough sorted out.
Yeah. Someone's got to sort it out.
Yes, so, that's very obvious.
So when I'm looking for people, it's a lot about reputation. You hear about guys who are really good at looking after the cars. I found
it's attention to detail, isn't it?
It's attention to detail. It's about caring about the client. I know you're going to go on a long trip, so I know the guys here are going to be very meticulous about how they do this, so that you don't have that problem. Many of the workshops who operate in Africa that are good and successful understand exactly that. These are people that are trusting them with their lives and making sure the work's done properly. Okay, so basically I've shown you pretty much how these components go together, and here we have our CV joint. Okay, the little seal that sits in the casing, this little seal that keeps this grease in the CV joint and the oil that runs for the differential is a small seal here, and this is where this shaft has been compromised. It's got a massive groove there. You can see that groove, it's huge. Okay.
That groove there?
That groove.
It looks like it's machined.
Yeah, it shouldn't be there. Okay. So that's the groove there. For us to check how good the CV joint is, now the CV joint is this part here, and then you've got a shaft which goes in here, and there's a clip, so you pull the shaft out, and that's a separate component. So two things we need to check when we're going to decide whether we're actually changing the CV joints. That's an expensive component. It's heavy, it's expensive, it's a lot of money. So we want to be sure two things. Over the life of this car, it's most likely it's had CV joints. 20 years, they wear out if they're not looked after. So I don't know whether this is a good quality CV joint. When I pull it apart, I'll be able to tell, because it's got like roll-up bearings, big wear bearings, sitting in there. Okay, and there are a number of them, and it allows the wheels to turn as they rotate. So this, when we pull it all apart and all of this falls apart and the bearings and all that, we can actually look inside here and we can tell how worn it is, and that'll determine whether or not we use the CV joint again. And on here, this edge here where the splines are, again we look to see how the splines, and you'll see the spline starts here, and what happens as they wear, they sharpen up these edges here, and then you get play. And of course this play accentuates, and eventually it could shear off, it could actually strip. So I'm trying to really decide, Andrew, do you need new CV joints? And this is worn, this shaft is considerably worn, okay. And now I'm going to show you, here is a brand new one from Terrain Tamer, okay. What I love about this is they pre-grease it. This is painful to try and do. It's really hard work. It's really messy getting all the grease in there, and it's applied with the grease. All we've got to actually do is swap that over. Okay, so now when we look at your area here where that seal's running, compare. How do those look? So you can see that's totally compromised. So what's going to happen here, if this doesn't seal, this grease leaks into this part of the axle, and the oil that runs the diff is now going to become full of that grease. That's what we don't want.
That's what I mentioned.
And that's why
Yes.
we are definitely changing the shaft.
Right.
Because the CV joint and the shafts are absolutely, say you can buy them separately. Terrain Tamer sell them as a kit, so they want you, and I actually endorse that. If you're changing the shaft, change the CV joint, do it properly. It's a little bit of money, but at least you know it's done. If I pull the whole thing out and you didn't have that groove there, and I stripped the CV joint and it really looked good inside, and I looked at the edge here and I went, actually this feels good, we'd reuse them. We'd clean them up, put them back together, and we'd reuse them. Nothing wrong with that.
But
So-
these are not.
These aren't, and we're not going to risk that. So you're going to have brand new ones, and this is part of stripping down a vehicle. And unfortunately, when you buy a vehicle like you did, we didn't know what we were going to find until we actually stripped the components down. And I always say to people, you're buying a vehicle basing your decision on a number of factors. So one of the factors I said I would always look at is the condition of the chassis, the condition of the body. Then I actually want to see how the person's looked after the car. That tells me a bit about how they probably drove the car. Under the engine bay, the oil condition, is the oil clean? Do they service it regularly? When you start finding a trail of things which start to give you doubt, you've got to decide, car hasn't been serviced, the interior looks tacky, it's got rust underneath, the body looks like it might have been painted, I'm walking away from that car. So it's a balance, because I might find a really good car that's been cleaned up, and then we open up a gearbox and there's a problem. So we're trying to have this very nice balance when you're buying an older car and saying, with the best and most experienced, someone like Snymans, yourself, myself, we know cruisers, we love them, we look for detail, we'll look on the body lines, has this had an accident, we know your car's been painted, does the chassis look good? Your chassis is in amazing condition. Actually your engine bay looks good. There's not a lot of parts that people have modified and added to it. So those are all telling me a story on the life of this car. When we pull these out, your diffs are in really good condition. So that's great. This wear on the shaft, that's wear and tear. So I'm not too worried about a shaft like that wearing, and I'm probably sure if we pull the CV apart, my gut says it's probably going to be okay, and we'd have to just test the splines. So trying to make decisions at the end of the day, that means, is this car going to be safe, reliable, and drive that 200,000-300,000 kilometers without major component failure?
So give me a rundown of where we are at this moment in the build.
Well, Andrew, we're busy putting back all the suspension components. Sean and Willem are working hard. And yeah, so Saturday the guys came in, they did all the suspension bushes, put them all in. They really went in nice and easily. You know, the feedback was great. It's a good Elastomo bush, well designed, easy to fit. So we're really happy with that. The shocks have gone in. Suspension brakes have all been built up now, and the hubs have gone back on. So all the wheel bearing kits have been fitted with new seals, and it comes complete together as a kit, which is lovely. And you can see these lovely shiny brakes, lovely quality. Of course, you've got your handbrake inside here, and it's the first time you feel it. Really feels really nice. You've got a different feel on the inside here. You can feel and of course the new handbrake shoes, new wheel bearings, and everything's going to go back on here. And of course, then we can get the wheels on.
Time to talk about brakes.
Yeah, how many of us have driven down a mountain pass with a heavy vehicle, sitting on the brakes, and suddenly the brakes have gone to brake fade and the pedal's gone to the floor?
Okay, quick story.
Have it.
I was in Geelong. The guys at Multidrive discovered my troop carrier's standard brake rotors were very badly scored, and Terrain Tamer came to the rescue and they sorted out some new rotors and pads for me. And I was up in the Highlands, the Victoria Highlands, and I had the lady next to me was part of the whole production crew, organising absolutely everything, and we were chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting and chatting. And I was going down this hill, down this hill, down this hill, still in high range, and it was quite steep. And this little voice at the back of my head saying, "You're in high. You should be in low for this." I mean, I was using the brakes a lot, okay, and I didn't smell anything, and I was lazy, and I was chatting. She was delightful company, and then suddenly my pedal started feeling extremely soft. So for nonchalantly not letting, well, it's fine, it's not a problem at all. And I actually put the handbrake, and I pulled the handbrake up just to give me a little bit of and stop the vehicle, and I put it in low range and carried on going, and those brakes were actually starting to fade, and they were the Terrain Tamer brakes. The standard brakes would have done that long ago, and that I was being complacent because I had these new clever brakes. So anyway, we've all done it.
We've all done it, and I think what I always say is, when you're going to take a vehicle that's much heavier, the braking distances are going to change, because suddenly what your vehicle, when you drove it in here, and now we add a lot of kit and weight to it, the momentum, and you try and stop something that's heavy, you need more brakes. You're going to have to apply more brake pressure, you're going to have to give more distance. So it's something to be very aware of. So when you add more weight, how about improving the brake efficiency, and how do we do that, and what do we do and what don't we do? So brakes, as I said to you, my highest value is safety, your safety. So why am I going to compromise your safety by giving you bad brakes when I know there are really good brakes on the market that are going to be more efficient for the weight you're carrying? So I always say to people, we will be upgrading your brakes, we will be spending money on that, we'll cut back somewhere else, because that's safety critical.
So you're basically saying, if you're going to cut back on anything,
It's not brakes.
It's not the brakes.
Not brakes.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
So if you looked at this brake disc we've got here, okay, this is actually very good condition still. Okay, if I feel it, it's got a few ridges on it. If I measured the thickness of it, it would tell me if it was undersized or if we could still machine it. If I was going to drive this car, or you were going to drive this car, and we weren't taking it to fully prepared over expedition vehicle, you would machine these, check the size, put new brake pads in, happy days, keep driving. Okay. If you get to a point where you're now going to go and load the car up like we're doing in building, do yourself a favor. A lot of people make good brake discs, and these ones are equally as good, and I really like them. It's nice when I come out of the packet. Okay, so we have a look here. Now compare. It's not a huge comparison. And you could probably visibly see a little bit of thickness difference. Okay, these may have already been machined. They are ventilated, but the difference here is that they're actually drilled and they're grooved. So the braking efficiency of these brakes, together with brake pads that match the material they've used and good quality brake pads, are going to give you a much better braking efficiency. So you're going to be able to stand on the brakes, and you're going to slow the vehicle down much quicker, more efficiently. What people don't do is when they get new brakes, you've got to bed brakes in. If I fit these for you now, the first 400 or 500 kilometers driving gently on the brakes. You need to bed the brakes in. You need to really let it settle in nicely. So that's important. It's important that you actually check the brakes regularly at your 5,000k intervals to check how the discs look, how the wear on the pad is.
So just explain to us the advantages of the holes and grooves.
So effectively you're getting better cooling.
Yes.
And you're getting better grip. So if I take my hand and I'm trying to grab and lift this up, like this. Okay, I'm trying to lift this up just with my fingers. Okay, it's got the hub in. It's going to be more difficult because my hand's slipping. If I grab here, I've actually got a bit more grip. I don't have the same weight, but my fingers are actually gripping a bit. So it is about making it a better surface to slow you down and be more efficient on the brake pads. And you've only got these little blocks. Oops. Well, they do pass the drop test. Okay, so here we've got the brake pads. Okay, these are your front brake pads. They're going to go against there, one either side. Okay, and this is all that's going to, when you press the pedal, grip the disc and slow you down. They've beveled them nicely. You get lots of really good brake pads, you know, and I know that the terrain tamer would have chosen. So the bevel's often put there just to stop them squealing. I found that brake dust collects on the discs, and in my experience, maybe tell me different, but basically this reduces the amount of squeal you get from brakes. It's able to get rid of brake dust because this is what wears. This part of the brake pad wears. That's metal, and so yeah, good quality brake pads. If I'm looking at the thickness of the brake pad, you can see how thick it is. Okay, it's a good almost 10 millimeters. Once it gets down to 50%, I'm really considering changing the brake pads, because I've seen pads that get too thin, and what ends up happening on the material here, it starts cracking because people have actually run them too low. They actually run them right up almost to the metal, a millimeter off the metal. Once you hit the metal on metal, you can throw these discs away. It's actually the last thing you want to do. So proper maintenance, proper checking of the brakes, proper monitoring, and anyone can do that. Have a look at the brakes, understand the thickness between the metal and the disc, and you can see there's a groove there, and understand how much. And you really, if it got to the bottom of that groove, you really are going too low, in my opinion, with a heavy loaded vehicle. You know, you're carrying a lot of weight here, so I don't compromise. If I have to take a set out and it's on 50%, I might even go a bit less than 50%, but 30%, I would never go less than that. I'd rather actually put new pads in, and if I'm putting new pads in, I need to make sure that this disc is actually also in good condition.
So you were saying earlier that the engine bay looks quite good. What did you mean by that?
Engine bay tells me a lot about what's happened in the life of the car, because people get lazy and they start fitting stuff and they start moving stuff around. So, you know, when I looked at your engine bay, the integrity of the engine bay, batteries that get fitted underneath, okay, got a bit of rust here, but it's actually in good condition, you know. When I look at some engine bays, I see stuff has been mounted, and particularly batteries badly mounted, and that rips up some of the inner wings. Now, it's a lot of weight to put a battery in the front of the car here, and when it's not fitted properly, not stayed, when I say the strap at the top not fixed in, you find that it actually does a lot of damage to here. And I often see people putting two batteries on the front wing, typical on the Troopies, and they fit a battery there and a battery there. And over the years, I found that it starts cracking up inside the wings on bad roads. It's a lot of weight. It's a really lot of weight, you know. And so we're able to, in this car, to spread the main battery here, an auxiliary battery there, or in time, batteries in the car. So, yeah, you know, the integrity of the pipes, the power steering pipes down on the cross member aren't all rusted. These pipes here. On the steering box, you've got these steel pipes that come along here. Now, quite often you find those have been rusty or they're damaged. The pipes, the fittings. So we know we're going to change these hoses. These are the heater hoses. We're going to also change these fuel hoses. And what happens with fuel hoses over time, they get really hard, and actually when you squash them here, little cracks are often, and I can feel here, if I squash this, there's cracks there. You can actually see there's a crack in this, okay? You can see the cracks there. So if I was reusing this hose, I would chop some off and I'd push it back on, because I actually don't want this hose loose, because that's what happens, or it sucks air in. If it sucks air in, it's compromising the fuel system. This isn't expensive, so we're going to change them. And we're also going to be fitting different fuel filter in the engine bay here, which we'll come back to at some stage.
The electrical system is not looking terrible, but they have made some modifications which is about the same standard as with the gearbox, isn't it? I mean, look at this, it's terrible.
So on the wiring side here, what I'm looking for when we come back to sort of refurbish, tidy up, sort out, is to remove any of the wiring that people have fitted that's not Toyota, because that for me is often not done properly. This wiring is not sleeved. This is a sort of sleeving. It's just loose wires. Here's a relay. It's got terminals on. There's a positive coming in there. If this had to fall off and come loose, and they can do, and short out, it's not sleeved.
I would have no fan.
You'd have no fan, and also this can short out because it hasn't got a sleeve over this. So it's just not done in a way which
Fused.
it's
Yeah,
fused,
it was
yeah.
fused
It's
there.
fused. And look here, look at this connection here.
Terrible.
Okay, terrible. So
Terrible.
all that's happening with these connections is you've got a really thick wire, really thin wire. This builds up resistance, and of course, as we know, it breaks down the main earth wire to the whole car. And look how poor this is. So this here, this is old, this tire, it's corroded. Okay, we'll put a new earth wire. This little earth wire to the body here, again, that needs to be cleaned out. So problems on electrics,
So-
often, as you know, come from bad earth.
Oh, bad earth. And that is, they've broken 12 books, 12 rules from rule 1 to rule 12. They've broken them, every single one of them right here. It's terrible.
So how are we going to improve it? We're going to put new battery clamps on,
Yeah.
because quite often these, either some of them stretch. So what happens
Yes.
when they stretch, they're not tight on the battery terminal anymore. They get corroded. We're going to put a nice new earth wire here. We're going to improve this wire. We're going to get rid of all these little wires because they are aftermarket wiring, which is not going to work anymore because we're taking that fan out. Okay, and we're going to go back and check the integrity of all the connections that we can here. And this has been taped up, these wires here. And I actually want to untape all this and check the integrity of the wires again, because now's the time to do it, so that all the Toyota wiring, which is all here, okay, we need to make sure that insulation tape over time comes undone. And it doesn't take much to take a roll of insulation tape and just retape some of this up so that all the wires are nicely insulated and they're protected. So if you look at an engine bay and the wiring is nice and tidy, everything's taped up nicely, it's zip tied, it's not all over the place, there's chance of a problem. The big risk on any sort of trip is a wire can rub against a bit of metal and short through. You may not ever experience it around town because the car doesn't do a lot of movement, but on bad roads, a wire coming and rubbing up against a piece of metal like this doesn't take long before it goes through and you have a massive short. So we want to make sure the wires that we add in, anything we add to the car, is going to be properly done, properly fused with really good terminals, so that your auxiliary power system, when you do fit it, is done as good as what Toyota did for their own car. When people have gone and added to wiring looms, or they've taped up, so the telltale for me was, here's the normal sleeving, and someone had gone and taped this up, and it didn't actually look like it was Toyota original. And when something's not Toyota original, I sort of start worrying. Now, what have they done? What's inside? Wiring is often the biggest bane of any problem on a trip, because it's difficult to trace, and if you haven't got a good understanding of electrics, you want at least your original Toyota wiring to be as good as possible. And the aftermarket wiring that you wire in for dual battery management systems needs to be even better. But generally that's put in afterwards, and you can get a good explanation as to what's been put in and how it's been put in. So I like to go through the harnesses and undo stuff and then see what I find, and quite clearly, so this is running to the alternator here, and what people have done here is they've taken some wires, this is quite a thin one, this is original wiring, and added this great chunk of wiring here, probably just not even soldered, wrapped over. There's 3 more wires to lengthen it. Why, I don't know. So as we undo all this, we can go back and repair these. So it's important to look through all the wiring and see. First of all, check the wiring at the plugs here to see that, first of all, it's not compromised, it hasn't pulled out, and tape comes loose, this old tape comes loose, so take it off and just take time and retape these wires. Often I find, like here, I can feel there's something not right in this wire here. Someone's done something here, and I'm sure if I take this off, there's a wire that's been added in or bent over or joined, and again it just adds another complication to the wiring. So by taking your time and going through all this and just nicely, if it looks good, it generally is good, you're going to make sure that you reduce any problems. That's what we want.
This is my hometown, Cape Town. I'm up on the mountains, and I actually lived for a while over the hill there with all the lakes, and it's absolutely beautiful. And that's the Cape Flats there. And I've taken a break from building my vehicle because right now I'm kind of battling with this, did I make the right decision? Did I buy the right vehicle? And was the risk that I took, is it paying off?
I'm about to find out, because the transfer gearbox and main gearbox is on its way back.
And the engine too has had a lot of work done to it, including our replacement alternator, water pump, thermostat housing, clutch plate, the face has been skimmed, and also some of the components in the fuel system, new injectors and new glow plugs. The gearbox is on its way.
Gearbox is
Now the process of getting it all back in there. What is that?
So they took the engine out because we needed to put the engine mountings on, and
Yes.
with a couple of bolts it was easy to pull it out. What they'll do is they'll pop the engine back in and then fit the gearbox with new mountings. And the gearbox has had a considerable amount of work done to it.
Yes.
So is the
More
transfer.
than we wanted.
Yeah.
Okay.
The noise you heard when you reversed backwards, that little bit
Yes.
of a noise you heard.
Yes.
Once we stripped the gearbox down, what we found is that someone had jump-started the car in reverse. Now that's not your strongest gear. If you're going to
Yes.
jump-start a car, you definitely don't want to do it in reverse.
Yes.
And actually to strip the teeth off the reverse gear.
Hence the clunk, 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 clunk.
And pieces and of course little bits of tooth in the gearbox, also not a good idea.
Yeah.
So that was the big wear.
That was my question. The teeth didn't.
Well, they do. And invariably...
Did it do any damage?
It's
do you
done
think?
no other damage. There's wear on the fifth gear,
Yes.
small fifth gear.
Yes.
You can see it's pitted.
Yes.
We are also changing that because we don't want to have any whines.
Right.
Now, when you mix new and old gears, and I'm not a gearbox specialist,
There's
this is a
potential
specialist
for
job.
whine, yes.
You don't want to have any whines, and
Yes.
especially when you're driving in fifth gear, this I can imagine you filming and it will drive me
Crazy.
Drive me
Okay.
crazy.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm very confident the guys have stripped the entire gearbox down, new bearings, new seals, new cluster gears gone in. We'll get all the old bits back, and then we'll
Okay,
be able
good.
to show
All
the
right.
viewers what we've changed.
Goody, 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 the main gearbox. I wonder what they did to it. And I wonder what it's going to cost me. Paul? Will I have to sell my children?
So here are bits that we've changed, some of them, but this is the gear that was, look at this.
Yes, a reverse gear.
Not good, eh? Yeah, that's really knocked those teeth clean off. Where did he keep the center diff bit?
No.
Did he change this cluster?
Oh, I see that.
Where's the fifth gear?
The fifth gear was. Now, if you look on the tooth there, I'm sure if you can see that. A lot of fitting on the tooth there.
Yes.
Okay, so if you can see that, that's the main reason. It's not that it won't work. And as I said, I'm not a gearbox specialist, but the specialist we used, his advice was change it, because the pitting on there, and then you're changing all these clusters and the main input shaft. New and old gear is not good, and especially if it's pitted. And he says that could cause a whine.
Is all of this code for, yes, prepare to sell your children?
Yeah, they've changed the main worn parts that they've had to, and it's because this gear here runs together with one of these.
This
In
one?
here, this one here, eh? Yeah.
But you see, when this happens, one of these teeth can bend. So if you put a new one on that, you get a whine, or
Yeah.
you get the same sound as you had, the tick tick tick, because one is bent. So if you change the cluster, then it becomes a whole story. Then you can have a gear whining 1 to 5 because you've swapped the cluster. So if you swap the cluster, you must change your input and your off gear.
Yeah. The other challenge also is that even if you inspect all this, if it's cracked inside, you won't know. So if there's a crack in here, the only way to do it is to actually go and x-ray it. That costs as much as changing all this. And that was one of his other concerns, exactly what Hubert said. But if there's a crack we don't see in one of the teeth, like in your tooth in your mouth, you don't always see it till they x-ray it. And you have a crack and it's painful and it's sore, and you want to, but here we won't know. And if that happens, it's not worth the risk. So because of all this and his experience, we're referring to someone who knows and has built gearboxes for 30 years. Well, so he really does know his stuff. So yeah.
But I hadn't seen anything yet.
Yeah. So Andrew, here we've seen some great welding. I must compliment the guy who did the welding. Sadly, this is what was giving you your two-wheel drive only on the 105. So the center diff, this is part of the center diff lock, which would have a set of gears and another gear, so it's like a complete diff with the different planetary gears. By welding this up, it's only allowing the rear wheels to work, and no H4, only H2. So this has all come out and we put new gears in, and this will make a good paperweight on your desk.
Here it is. That to me is the symbol of this particular exercise. And in the videos to come, we finish up the build. I have a very memorable, no spoilers here, trip up to Pretoria. And yes, it did cost me more than I hoped it would. And I will make public all of the costs so you can see what it cost me and what it might cost you for a similar exercise. But how about that?
I'm going to keep that, actually.
So you need to.
That is, that's a beauty, actually. That's a real beauty.
It is, yeah. It is. Well, it's not often. Look, you've got to give credit to people who make modifications at times and desperate needs. We don't know what the problem was. I mean, he may have had to make it out of necessity, but it never got repaired again. And that's sometimes what people do. Bush mechanics and making a plan, as we say in South Africa, when you absolutely have no choice or you can't get parts and there's only one way to get home. Well, he made a plan, and a good plan. But going forward, you need to undo that plan and put it back to what it should be.
But given the fact that it has the freewheel front hubs fitted, I don't think this wasn't mark up blunt. This was maybe an idea gone bad.
Maybe what was happened is someone didn't pull apart the transfer box to see what was the problem.
So in other words, they fitted the freewheel hubs, the car wouldn't go anywhere, and then they realized, oops, we now have to do some welding to lock it up, and then they went, oops, now we can't go four-wheel drive.
Well,
was it that bad?
Possibly this was a plan made when they had a problem. What do you think? When they had actually had a problem somewhere along the line, and this plan was made, and then that was driving in two-wheel drive. And then, if you look when the whole thing was apart, the gearbox specialist said to us, to engage from H2 to H4 with the lever wouldn't have worked because there's a little sleeve that moves it across. That was rattling around in the transfer box. So that would have been a noise if the prop shaft's turning. Fitting the freewheeling hubs would just stop that prop shaft turning and stop a noise rattling in the transfer box. Who knows?
So you're saying it was a problem, make a plan, get home, rattle, easy way of sorting out the rattle instead of dropping the box, just put in some freewheel hubs. Okay, should we give them the benefit of the doubt?
Not the right way, but hey.
No, I'm not going to. It's far more interesting if we don't.
But you haven't compromised. Basically, everything's been changed now. Full set of gears have gone in. We've changed what needed to be changed. And that said, there are not many times that gearboxes need this sort of work. I can count on my hands, and you know more than me how many boxes do work. It's not often. You do synchros on a box, bearings, seals.
Yeah, usually we do a lot of shimming on this to set the backlash, but that's about it. In my time, I've never replaced these gears, never. So something happened, but you can't see on the old gears that it broke or stripped. So something happened, and let's quickly repair it, maybe sell it.
No, who knows?
And the guy you bought it from, maybe he bought it from the previous guy, and
Yeah, I'd like to say that's probably the case. I mean, someone
think
who,
it was. He
where
didn't have
you
it for
went
long.
to pick it up, I don't think he would have honestly, you know, sold this to you like that, not knowing who you are, what you're going to do with the truck. So I don't believe that's the case. He probably just didn't know. And very few people actually use 4x4 when they drive this truck around town all the time. You know, how many people actually put it into H4 or use the diff locks or anything like that? And that's more often the problems results from not being used more than being used and abused. So anyway, you've got it all done. Gearbox is going to go back in. We now have an engine, we have a gearbox, we have a car, and we've got a few able bodies that are all going to put it together again. And we'll come together.
yeah, slowly but surely.
And you know, Andrew, we didn't actually put all these parts back in your gearbox because you don't need them. It's a more modified gearbox.
Yeah, fine.
Day 5, and we are basically, the drivetrain is complete, and there's the gearbox ready to go in now. We're hoping to get it in yesterday, but we ran out of time. The electrical, we've sorted out the electricals in the engine bay. They were a mess. They've been sorted and rewired. Paul and I did that yesterday, so everything is now ready for the gearbox and the engine to go back. And then of course the engine is then plumbed in terms of fuel, air conditioning and all those other things that have to go to the engine. And windscreen we're still waiting for, radiators we're still waiting for, and we basically have today to finish it because tomorrow it leaves here for the replacement rear bumper. So that's what we're chasing. So there's a lot of work to do today.
And so in it goes, and it's wonderful to watch them work. No yelling, no shouting. It just all seems to happen without a lot of effort.
I'm amazed on how quickly this guy they got the gearbox in.
Yeah, you know,
It took them like a minute.
if you've got a car on a ramp, it's also quite easy if you've got a hoist. But these guys, to get access to everything that we're doing, they've
Yeah.
worked off axle stands.
Yeah.
And in Africa, we do a lot of that because, you know, ramps are expensive.
Yeah.
And face it, when you're in the bush and you need to do work, you're going to be on the 4 wheels.
Yes.
Or axle stands.
Yes.
And these guys are really good. They get it in, they put the new gearbox mount in, they've jacked it up in place, and of course the engine will just drop in very easily.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how quickly the car actually goes back together.
Yeah.
You know, if you said to people, my engine's on the floor, my gearbox is there, everything's stripped,
It looks like a...
you'd think I'm never going to get it together. And I guess we'll have this car close to running by the end of today. So, yeah.
Oh, we need to get oils.
We need oils, yeah. And we want to get down, there's a great spare shop round here we're going to go to.
Let's go.
So let's head off.
Well, we got.
Go,
I mean,
go a few minutes now.
we've got time.
Make sure we get the right oils.
Let's go now.
Yeah. These guys are great. They normally have everything I need. Good service. We're lucky to have them around.
The word onderdelen means spares. I think.
As you can see, it's stacked with stuff.
Nice.
Plenty, yeah. No, it's nice, really nice. Good.
I think we need some oil.
We need a lot of oil, but morning, sir.
Oh, there you are. Sorry.
Listen, guys, we need.
I should add here that this was all staged. We actually sent our order in a few days back. They agreed to donate all the fluids we needed for the rebuild.
First for engine oil, 50 litres, some Shell, 15 litres. Good stuff.
The sump requires 12 litres of oil. Carry on.
We'll keep some spare, always useful.
3 litres spare.
Yes.
Axle, rear axle. 6 litres. Okay, we've got again axle. So we've got front and rear axle.
Right.
Okay, which are also going to take 2 to 3 litres each.
Right.
Gearbox oil. This makes it easier to actually put it in the gearbox. You know, you fill it from the side.
The small bottles.
Small bottles make it a lot easier, and any spare we can keep.
How many litres in the main gearbox?
I think is a good more than 2 litres.
Okay.
Check without check, 2.5 litres. So we'll carry enough.
And a few spares.
We always want to carry at least a litre of each oil.
Right.
Depending on how far you're going.
Yes.
So if you're going to go right up through Africa, at least a litre. You know, you want engine oil, you want gearbox oil, you want differential oil.
Right.
Transfer box oil, power steering fluid, brake fluid. So let's have some else. What do we need?
We don't deliver there, so we'll have to send it with you.
Good idea.
He's going to carry as much as he needs.
All right, that is.
All right, transfer box.
Okay. That's
Gearbox oil. Here we are, gearbox oil. You can see I've
Okay,
done it really
yes.
nicely.
Oh, yes, they have
I
actually.
show you, so you can't. People make
can't-
mistake on oils.
And then they go and put this in an auto box. So that's a good idea. Yes.
And
Okay.
you know, and you get guys who are really knowledgeable, like these guys here, who give us all the knowledge.
Yes.
But when you walk in to buy oil and you don't know what you're buying,
Yes.
that's dangerous.
That's
Especially on
that's-
gearboxes.
Especially gearbox.
That's especially gearbox. That's
Yeah.
smart actually.
You know, and we've got some brake fluid,
Clutch and brake fluid.
clutch and brake fluid. So again, you know, carrying spare of this. I use .4. It's
Yeah.
not fully synthetic.
You mentioned
it's
that.
sort of newer. You do
So
get,
you can replace
get
it or
higher.
update-
You can buy this readily in Africa.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. You know, you can.
Yeah.
And I'm always using a good brand. So I'm looking for Shell, or I'm looking for Castrol or BP. I like to use a brand of oil that we know.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've got power steering ATF. It's quite a lot of oil. Now don't forget the weight of this. Besides the fact that you're going to put it in the gearbox and the engine, you need to carry spare.
Yes.
And the one thing about oils, they mess. They make a hell of a smell when they spill in your oil in your car.
Especially gearbox oil.
Especially gearbox oil. So I like these little bottles. Generally I check they're tight, I tape them up and I put them in Ziploc bags.
So now the smell of this oil, I like to sniff it every now and again. Not for what you think. It's
Not for
because,
cooking,
no, what it does, it reminds me, I won't do it now, it reminds me of my Range Rover. The entire interior smells exactly of EP90 gearbox oil.
Yeah, but that's factory fitted. That's all.
That's a factory smell. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes.
Absolutely.
And it leaves its mark all over the place. But we love that. No, look, thank you very much guys for
Thank you. Excellent.
working with us on this.
I'll
And
send
also-
you your extra surplus oil to take with, since we don't do the deliveries in Zambia.
You don't?
No. Well, next year it's a short-term project of ours.
I think you'd like to deliver it in Zambia yourself.
I would come there myself. with
Yeah.
my-
On yourself. Okay,
Yes.
I'll give you the
Yeah.
thing.
My
Croc
for-
Valley,
my
Croc
fortune
Valley,
loves going
South
off.
Luangwa.
Yes.
Okay,
Just
see
for
then,
the oil.
Just
bring-
for the oil.
just bring us there.
There's going to be a fight here as to who's going to go.
That'll be me.
Well, that didn't take very long, and by the time Paul and I got back, they were busy fitting the engine. Very exciting. This is the last time this happened, when I put an engine in a vehicle. It was my Range Rover, and it was in 1986, 7.
So Andrew, we've got your prop shafts. We've sent them off to an engineering firm. They've changed the universal joints and they've actually fitted new sliders. This is a sliding joint here which slides, and they take them off and they weld in a new sliding joint, use the rest of the shaft. These bits are all original, and of course they've changed the universal joints. Most important, they've actually balanced the prop shafts. So when you've got play on a shaft like this, where these sliders, these splines here, as you can see, that moves up and down. There's a set of splines in here, and that has play. And especially on the front prop shaft on some of the vehicles where they don't always use this, the part-time four-wheel drives have more of a problem because the shaft sits still. Yours is permanent four-wheel drive, so it's always rotating. But here it wears, and that wear accentuates, and then of course you get the universal joints which people don't grease. Now, part of the servicing every 5,000 kilometers is really important to get someone with a grease gun. You can get the grease nipples. I like these U-joints because the grease nipple is easily accessible. Some of them are hidden inside here, and they're much more difficult to get a grease gun on there. So here you can get a grease gun on here, you can grease it properly, push out all the old dirty grease, wipe it clean, and know that these are properly greased. And if you grease them properly, you should never ever have to repair a universal joint. Mostly it's from lack of grease. When people drive through water, dusting grease, it mixes in with the grease and it's like a grinding paste. And then when you're trying to test this, you can grab one, grab the other, and try and turn them in opposing directions. to see if there's any play. And of course, you know, one side's going to be fitted to the diff and the other side to the transfer box. And once it's in and balanced, it smooths out the ride. There's less of a jolt through the whole drivetrain. When you take your foot off the clutch, you sometimes hear this almighty clunk through a drivetrain. And it starts off with wear in all the different components. And wherever there's play, it actually, anything that's got a bit of play and you knock it, that knocking, that harsh knocking is what does damage. And when the prop shaft's not balanced, it puts extra strain on the diffs, it puts extra strain on the transfer box. So that's what you don't want. The side
They keep
frame.
the side, so there's just this piece that they have re-welded in.
Basically, this with the water's flowing through the tubes here
Yeah.
and the fins to cool it. So completely put a new core in, which
Okay.
is soldered and built in.
Right.
And then they're pressure tested, which is just to make sure that
course,
it holds
of
pressure,
course.
there's no leaks.
And is the cowling
And this
new?
is the cowling. So
It
here,
looks like the same. Is that the old one?
no, this is a cowling that was second hand we put on because
Okay.
remember it had the electric fan on this
Yes.
before, we've taken
Yes.
that off.
Yeah.
So we'd rather go back to the viscous fan, it's more
Definitely.
reliable, it's, yeah, in many respects I don't want an
Okay.
electric fan.
And there's some newspaper in there, which,
They've just put that in,
as long as they take
sprayed
it out,
Yeah. It'd be a shame.
it would be a shame.
But you can see how quickly, you know, what people don't realize when you drive through water and that, especially if it's sedimented,
Yes.
they push that sediment through the through the aircon
Yes.
condenser, through the radiator,
Yes.
and this blocks up very quickly. You know?
Another thing on that, if you get grass seeds,
Oh yeah, they're
don't
terrible.
use a hose to blow it out because the grass seeds can dry, and then they
swell.
Then they
Yeah.
get moisture and they swell and they stick.
I think a big thing, you know, when you fit back an air conditioning condenser and the radiator, more often than not, there's a bit of foam sponge that keeps the,
Yes.
the
Air
you know,
sealing.
a bit of air seal, so it doesn't suck in stuff. So you need to make sure that's right. But actually, more important, clean it and check it. And if it means that you've done a big grassy section and you've been lazy and you haven't put a seed net over the front, even with a seed net, it still can suck seeds
does,
in.
yeah.
But
Especially
it's
at the bottom.
important, yeah, especially at the bottom. So I just say, you know, it's like anything. Maintain and check. And
Yeah.
if it means taking your radiator out,
Yeah.
it's worth it, just to check it and clean it.
The only rust we did find on the vehicle was actually on the top of the windscreen. And at Snymans they also have a panel shop where they will not only repair it but actually respray it in the matching colour. That'll be done the moment this thing is back on its wheels. The handbrake has two separate adjustments, one at the back and one on the actual hubs themselves. And a lot of people don't realise that the one on the hubs is actually just as important as. So somebody had butchered it and put in some kind of bracket to put it up. So the guys here have removed it, and we'll get the handbrake working again as it should be. And slowly I can see all of these parts being fitted to the vehicle, and the old parts have been put here. The alternator, that's the manifolds being replaced. There's the glow plugs and ejectors. And there it is. Day 6 of the build, and we're getting quite close to starting the engine. Windscreen is done, exhaust pipe still has to be done, and the air conditioning radiator condenser still has to be done. Electrics are complete, fuel system is complete, power steering all put back together again. Air filter steel needs to go in there, but we're doing very, very well.
Okay, Andrew, imagine you're in the bush and you've gone to some small little workshop. You really don't know how good the guys are. Unlike here, we know the guys, we trust them. There's certain checks that I always do when someone's done a service on my car, and they absolutely are the bare bones safety checks so that things don't go wrong. And I've seen it and I know it happens. So basically, when they've serviced the car, they've changed the oil and filter. Okay, I want to make sure that the drain plug at the bottom of the engine has been properly tightened. I've watched them tighten, I actually feel it myself, just to make sure that's properly tight, new washer, and I know the oil can't fall out. Because you wouldn't believe it, people leave that not tight, someone's distracted, it comes loose, you lose all your oil, and your engine seizes. The next thing is the oil filter. Now here the oil filter sits. Generally these should be put on by hand. Take the new oil filter, a little bit of oil on it, on the rubber seal, screw it on by hand. After the guy's fitted it, just come and grab it with your hands, dry hands or a cloth, and just make sure that that's tight. By hand, you tighten it as tight as you can. Don't use a tool to tighten it. Generally you over tighten the filter and you can damage it. The other thing, once they've put oil in the engine's actually got to run that oil through, fill up the filter. So after they've started the engine, in fact as the guy starts the engine, I want to make sure that the oil light goes out, oil pressure comes up, nothing's running out, and after they've run it for 15 to 20 seconds, maybe half a minute, turn it off, let the oil settle, and then check your dipstick. Check that the oil is actually sitting on the mark. Now it's actually sitting slightly high on the mark because we haven't run this engine yet, and these guys know they slightly overfill it. They know the amount of oil that needs to go in this engine. It's like 12 liters, and when this is run and it's checked and it's settled, it should be exactly on the mark or top it up. So that's really, really important. So we've actually added to the fuel filter system. This car came out with 2 filters, but on the Terrain Tamer product line they actually supply us this very nice flash loop filter system. It's got a filter that takes the filter down to 30 microns. That's right, 30 microns. So it's basically better than the normal filter. It's also got the look bowl that you can look in. You can actually see if there's any sediment. So the first thing I'd pick up if there's a problem and you've been driving, you've just filled up with fuel, the car's either smoking, it's not pulling properly, stop, have a look in here, have a look in this little bowl here and see if you can see any sediment. Maybe there's water, which means that the water will be on the bottom, the fuel floats on top of the water. It's got a drain, you can drain off anything, but really that's telling us a story. It's telling us there's a problem in the tank, there's probably water in the tank. Sometimes they mix paraffin with the diesel. More recently in Botswana there's been sludge that some of the safari vehicles have picked up, which really has a problem once it gets into the injection pump. So we're trying to make sure that before it gets into the injection pump, in fact even better, before it gets into your tank. Now I'm very sure that if I go to a small remote place which has got old pumps, they're probably tanks that haven't been serviced, they're old, they've probably got sludge at the bottom, and if you're unlucky to get the last fill, you might put all that in your tank. So how do we prevent that? You could simply carry a jar, an empty glass jar, ask the guy to put a bit of fuel in the jar before it goes in your tank and have a look at the clarity of the fuel, have a look to see if there's any sediment, any separation. That's going to tell you a story. You can buy a filter, a pre-filter, it's a funnel. Raycore do it, drop it into the filler.
What is the name of that thing? I can't remember what they call it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a great...
it's a very nice thing.
It's something I do take, actually. Okay. I don't use it too often, but...
Filter Man?
No, it's got... There are a
Sludge
couple of
Man.
Sludge Man. There's actually in Australia they've got one that's also something similar. So it's basically a plastic funnel, and when you're going to fill up at the tank, at the fuel station, the fuel goes into that funnel, it separates water and it separates any impurities. And you'll be surprised when you filled up your tank and you look in the funnel and you go, all that would have gone into my tank. So, you know, it's a good habit to get into using something like that. Or if you're not sure, you know, if you drive into a small town, ask people where the best fuel station is to use. You know, you and I picked up bad fuel at a good station in Khansi in Botswana.
Paul and I have come to Botswana to shoot a web series called Overland Workshop.
Do I have the knowledge I need to go on this trip?
We sit and discuss various overland and off-road topics, such as water, survival, which spares to carry, cooking, security, handling border posts, and a whole lot more.
We're talking overlanding.
One of the topics, fuel contamination, actually became a problem while we were talking about it. So it was not just a matter of theories, but we had a problem and we needed to solve it.
Okay, a very interesting thing is happening right now as we're driving. We've just left Khansi. We put 90 litres of fuel in the back tank. We want to get to the Makati. We want to be as light as possible. We do need a reasonable amount of fuel. We decided let's fill up the front tank, leave that alone, back tank enough to get to the pans. By the time we get there, we will be empty. Now, the car's running terribly.
Yeah, well, we've got two options now. So, because we found that the problem is giving us this kind of like jerking sensation while we're driving.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the vehicle's not getting enough fuel. So what we've got is we've got a particle buildup. So junk from the Bowser, from their tanks,
have actually
So
now
you,
gone
you
into
think
our
this
fuel
is
tank.
contamination?
Well, there's two
or
things.
is it-
Or there's fuel contamination. Now, some of these garages have very old tanks, and these old tanks either have water condensation inside the tank, they don't always clean the tanks out often enough,
Right.
or in very rare cases, they go and they mix paraffin with the diesel to bulk it up.
You got to wait for this to settle, and then you see your dirt line coming there. We'll shift it like if it was gold. How's that? You see now see how dirty it is there. And you compare a new filter next to it. Put the new filter next to it.
So would you say it was high level of dirt rather than contamination? Is that what you would
I'd
suggest?
say it's more dirt, fine dirt particles.
So you never know, but generally a busy fuel station is going to have a higher turnover of fuel and less
And that's
likely.
why we went there.
And that's why we went there, and we still got stuck.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the fuel basically comes from the tank. It comes into this very nice filter system. It gets pumped through into the original Toyota system. Now it's a very similar system. It's also got a sedimenter water trap. It's got a little float inside here, and the wire that comes from here will put a light on the dash if the water becomes too much here. Generally, that never really happens too often if you're looking at the problem here, or if you're feeling it. Now you drive your car, you feel it's just not pulling the way it was 2 hours ago. Ask yourself, what have you just done? Oh, I've just put fuel in. Probably the problem. So when you come to change the filters, you always carry a couple of spare filters. So you've got actually 4 of these, and you'll carry at least 2 or 3 of these, depending on where you're going, how far you're going, and generally have at least 2 of each in your vehicle at all times. When you use them up, you can just replace. In this situation, if we had a problem, we couldn't get the flash loop spare filters, we could literally bypass it by just swapping one of the hoses, leaving this filter out, and just using the Toyota one. But the advantage of having the 2 filters is going to be a double. He's determined to make it
Same
noisy
guy,
for us.
same guy,
I think
carry
he's waiting for us to go up and down. Anyway, so the filter comes from the tank in through here, through to this one. Now, new filters mean that these are both empty, and you need to now get the fuel from the tank to fill up these filters and basically bleed all the air out. So what I tend to do is I take this pipe off, which is going to the engine. I put my finger over the end here and I pump, and as I'm pumping, as you push the air out, my finger comes away. So I push the little button down. This is the actual pump. This is nice and hard now. So when I push this down, it pushes the air out. I let my finger go and I push my finger back, and it sort of sucks the fuel. So it's like if you're trying to suck from a bucket of water with
Like
a
a
hose.
siphon.
Like a siphon.
Same action.
Similar sort of setup. So you do that until eventually you see the fuel come in here and eventually bleeds itself all the way through here. Now you know the system's not got air in. A little bit of air in this pipe's not a problem. Connect it back up and run your car. And make sure that the fuel in your tank, if that's been compromised, you're going to need to blow this pipe that takes the fuel from the tank back into the tank and drain the tank. Now some aftermarket tanks don't have drains on. It's criminal not to have a drain plug on your tank, because you just want to be in that situation where you picked up bad fuel and you now have to drop your whole tank just because you didn't have a drain on it. So if you're having, most good tank manufacturers that I know of, especially in Australia, they build tanks, and I know the South African guys, they build them with good drain plugs. So check that.
We replaced the power steering pump, which is attached to the front of the engine, with a new one. Did we need to replace it? And because we did replace it, now what must we do to get the system working?
No, we didn't need to change this. It was actually still in good condition. What you can get is you actually get a kit, little seals and O-rings that Terrain Tamer do sell, and you can strip this down and just put that kit in. And that's normally enough to stop this leaking. I don't touch these unless there's actually a noise from them or there's absolutely a leak from them. So if they do leak, pull it apart, put the seal kit in, put it back together. We put a brand new one in, so all the oil came out the system, and we're going to change the oil. Now people don't always change power steering oil, and it's sad because it's an oil that works just as hard as any of the other lubricants, and mechanics often get lazy to drain the system and flush it and put new oil in. It's a bit of work to do it, but it's so worth doing because that oil gets dark and you can start smelling the oil. It's the red Dextron 2 automatic transmission oil. Okay, it's red on my finger, although my finger's a bit dirty. And this oil is what's used in here, or or can be a clear power steering oil, depending on what's come out from the factory. Because we've put the new pump in, we actually have to bleed the system. So to not put strain on the system, okay, we jack it up, we take someone in the car, we'll rotate the steering full lock left and right, a number of turns, just to get the air out the system while we keep topping it up into the reservoir here. Once we're happy that we got most of the air out, then the car gets started and the process gets repeated, and you keep working the steering backwards and forwards to make sure you're getting rid of all the air. And once the air is bled out, then take it for a drive the next morning, check it again, and just monitor it a couple of days just to make sure that the oil settles. And of course, you know, there are levels on this plug, and you've got a if I can read that, you get a cold and a hot level. Okay, so top of the cold level, and then of course you've got it when it's hot, it's going to be to the top level. Now that's really important, that you make sure that when you're doing your daily checks, and we'll go through that at some stage, that you absolutely make sure the oil's on level. Because again, if it keeps dropping the level, it's telling you another story. You can drive with a leak on a power steering right around the world, as long as you top it up and it doesn't get too excessive. So really key, good oil, make sure it's great, good parts, and a good system going. I'm worried you're pumping diesel.
When I took out the injector, I
Bleeding the fuel system by pumping the top of the fuel filter. I sense an engine start countdown coming on.
40, check inverters. 30 seconds, check the arm. Minus 20, report popping. Good. Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Open solo fuel bin. Open. 3, 2, 1. 0.
So now we're going to put it on the left to work on the exhaust, and then make sure everything underneath the vehicle is in good shape.
De nog hier put dit. Dus ik moet voor je afsnijden. Dus ik maar afput dit. Dat is het die lengte kry. Lengte kan kry. So kyk net of jy hom nou gaan inkran sim jy die cross mee maak.
So always, once you've done a big build, it's really important to go and do a nut and bolt check and just make sure nothing's been forgotten. Just looking carefully. Go through every nut and bolt, look over, check the bolts, check the nuts, check the new pipes that have gone on. The car will then be driven and come back and then retightened again just after everything settles. So right now we're going to do the exhaust. And as you'll see here, new gearbox mounts, prop shafts have been done. Obviously our very nice gearbox has been redone. It's looking really good. I think the key thing for any vehicle, once you've done a big build like this, is to make sure you actually go and get a proper test drive done. You know, test drive the car, come back, check it, check for leaks, and literally retrace your steps. Go over every clamp that you tightened, check all the nuts and bolts, check the suspension, recheck the levels. It's an important time. You know, you had the gearbox in pieces, after it's been driven, check the level again, make sure it's all spot on, and it's cool when you do it.
So now at this point it's obviously important for me to reflect on what has been done to the vehicle, how much money I've spent, and to come up with a conclusion. Am I ahead of where I thought I would be at this point, is the question. My gut feeling is yes. There were so many unknown factors. As much as I know about four-wheel drives and all the things that go with them, there was so much that I didn't know, not just about four-wheel drive generally, but specifically a vehicle and the things that were wrong with it and the things that were, and there's one overriding conclusion that I have come to with this build. If you are looking for a used four-wheel drive vehicle, look for one that has had the least things done to it. The less, this is a case of less is more. Far more.
because almost every part of this, sorting this vehicle out, the additional unexpected expense have all been related to aftermarket stuff fitted to the vehicle, and that were fitted badly. Not that it just was fitted, it was fitted badly. If it was fitted well, it would be a different story altogether. But it wasn't. And there are enough, what's the word? Palookas in this industry, in the motoring industry across the world. Enough people that know so little about what they're doing, they'll happily change it to two-wheel drive, or add this and take away this and add this, and think they know more than Toyota. And I think this is probably typical, not in terms of what's wrong with the vehicle and what we've corrected, but typical in terms of the fact that when something has been changed in the vehicle, it can so easily cause a whole lot of unexpected results. So again, you're buying a vehicle, look for one that's been a mum's shopper's car. They are by far the most valuable, even if the mileage is higher, even if it has no roof rack and no bull bar and no winch. Be grateful. Less, in this case, is definitely more.
In the next instalment, the final touches as we replace the rear bumper and ready it to carry 2 spare wheels, and a gathering of fans of the channel at Snymans 4x4 outside of Cape Town, topped with a last-minute electrical glitch that delays my departure on the 1,600 kilometre test run. Have you ever heard of the expression 90% done, 90% to go? I kind of feel that's where we are now, because we're almost finished, but there are lots of little things that still need to be done. And to celebrate our achievement, we're actually having a meet and greet here in Cape Town. We've invited the general public, not only Patreons, but everybody that loves the channel in Cape Town to come and spend some time with us tonight. So by the time you see that, it would have long gone, but we'll have a camera out and we'll film a few things. But it's running well, everything's perfect, no issues. We're changing the back springs because they weren't right, and a few other little minor things that still need to be done, including the rear wheel carrier. Now that has to go up the road to a company called GoBX, and they're supplying one of their products. I've mentioned them before. I've used them in various rental vehicles in Namibia. I've had them on my own vehicles. I have them on my current troop carrier has one of those rear wheel carriers, and that's what I'm lucky enough to be in Cape Town, because they're here and they're fitting onto the vehicle, and that'll happen a little later today.
Looking good, Andrew. We're actually fitting a bigger fuse for the alternator because we've upgraded the alternator. The original fuse was just a bit too, you could see it starting to melt, just wasn't taking the bigger amperage. Much bigger alternator, so that's good. And the guys are finishing up the trims on the windscreen. We're going to do the antifreeze now that we've run it and tested the cooling system, there's no leaks, and then they'll go through and check all the clamps, and then we're off to fit the rear bumper. So Andrew, we've got a bumper that's we fit into your car. It's a GoBX product, and it has to be, for me, the most reliable rear wheel bumper to carry 2 spare wheels on expedition that I have used, personally experienced. All hire companies use them, and it's proven. We fit them to all our clients' vehicles. I'm really pleased you're taking one of these. We've got really good recovery points here, and these are the circular high-lift jack points. And you use a high-lift jack adapter. In South Africa, we can use this to pull out and remove the tow hitch. I also use this for recovery. Strong, you get a solid steel fitment which goes in with a nice bow shackle on the end that you can put in here. So it makes a really nice, I say pulling point, but I like to recover with a V sort of configuration. Yeah. But yeah, really good, solid. Good lights. It's really quality, and I must say, you know, all the ones we fitted to for my client vehicles, yeah, it is a superb product.
Back at Snymans, waiting for the people to arrive, doing the last little bits in the vehicle, but I wanted to show you why I like this wheel carrier so much. Let's pretend I'm carrying something heavy. Oh, I tell you what. There you go. I want to put my filter set in the back of the car. So what do I do? If I want to take something out of the back of the car, you show me another single-handed wheel carrier on the market and I'll be interested. The other part about this is that the actual wheel itself, the way it is braced, it is actually braced here, and this entire thing is pulled down onto here. There is no movement with these wheel carriers, and when you hit really bad corrugations, there's hardly any vibration from the back of the vehicle. That's why I like them so much. One of the last items to arrive and to be fitted is the air conditioning condenser. The original one, as you can see, was absolutely rotten. That's largely because of lack of maintenance, as much as anything else. It's 4 p.m. and people are starting to arrive. Well, I knew that, Terrain Tamer gave me a big box of stuff, which was great, but in my wildest dreams, never, ever in my wildest dreams.
The fusing the gear.
Not even, doesn't, look, can you?
But someone's gone to a lot of effort, hey?
There are actually people in the world that... We started on Tuesday and we have been working every day except for Sunday, and we finished about 10 to 3.
It's very tough quest. A lot of equipment, you've got a cord that you want to use.
Meet and greet was a great success, and now it's time for me to leave Cape Town and head up to Pretoria. It is a 2-day drive, but during testing we've discovered a small problem, and we believe it is due to a wiring issue. In fact, not a fault, but so much, again, we've seen quite a bit of it with this build, mistakes made by previous people that have worked on the car. And it appears as if they have wired up the alternator via the battery fuse, and that's not the way it should be done. It should be done directly to the battery. So we think we have solved the problem. And apart from that, gassing the aircon. I should be ready to go within the hour. It's early on Friday morning, and there are a lot of important last-minute things to do. I am hoping that if all goes well, I can leave today, which means that I will not have to rush my long drive up north. And given all of the work we've done on the vehicle, I really don't want this test trip to be a rush. All right, 3 hours, almost 4 later, we have sorted the problem. It was a glow plug issue, and we've sorted now. I can go. Nothing to stop me now. 10 days have passed, during which the three of us have rebuilt the Landcruiser. That process is now complete, and I'm ready to drive it up to Pretoria for it to have accessories fitted, turning it into an overlander. I've been on the road for an hour. Everything seems to be good. The ride is much better. The gearbox is making a bit of a... I can hear a whine. It's not serious, but it's there. It's a vague whine. The whole vehicle actually feels new. The steering feels more solid. Even though the steering I thought was really good, it's even more. Yeah, the vehicle feels tighter, newer. Engine is pulling really, really well, much better than it was Everything's good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try and reach a town called Beaufort West. And I'd like to tell you the story a little bit about how many times I have actually driven this particular road from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and of course Johannesburg back to Cape Town. I have done it, I haven't counted, it must be 30 times, it could be as many as 40. And often when I was doing this drive, it was to collect a new four-wheel drive for my own use. This is not unlike that. It's not so much collecting but delivering, because the vehicle will actually be based, I will actually store it up northern part of the country. It's closer to the places that I like to visit, and so I am in effect not collecting it but delivering it. So what I used to do often on this particular road is, then like now, I don't particularly feel very safe, and I haven't done a lot of filming because of it. So I wanted to find a little road that goes off the main, so that's now the N1. That's the main road that runs all the way from Cape Town right the way up to the northern tip of South Africa. So it's a main arterial route, and there's a lot of traffic on it almost all of the time. And so I'll take a little side road like I've done now, and I love doing this at about this time of day. The sun is just going down, and I'll come and just stand and listen to the traffic and just enjoy a moment alone. This area is called the Karoo, the Greater Karoo, and I know this area very, very well. Now you see that hill right over there, that overlooks the town of Beaufort West, and I'm going to spend the night there tonight. I overnighted last night at a place that I come to very, very regularly because it's always clean, it's not expensive, and it's right on the route. It's called Wagon Wheels. It's just outside Beaufort West. Doesn't look very impressive, but actually that was $60 for the best room in the house, so I don't think that's bad. So now we'll be going to Colesberg. Now Colesberg is kind of the halfway point, not exactly halfway, but it's pretty close, halfway point between Cape Town and Johannesburg, and Colesberg is quite significant to me.
I have noticed this morning that the timing belt warning light has illuminated. Also that we've crossed the threshold of 300,000 kilometers. Nothing to worry about, it's an automatic thing. That little light comes on every 150,000 kilometers. I always used to get up at this time just before sunrise and hit the road at first light. The light is absolutely beautiful on the open road. Really, really used to love this this road. And to be honest, I had a bit of a rant yesterday because I was finding driving it not as much fun because, well, I don't know, maybe it's my imagination, but the drivers here have got even worse than they were. South African drivers must be ranked as one of the worst in the world. Generally speaking, they have absolutely no regard for the speed limit, and especially no regard for solid white lines. Already 3 times I have been overtaken by vehicles traveling very fast around blind bends and drops and hills, and without they have no patience at all. They will not stay behind a truck. Anyway, having got that out of my system, I didn't run you the whole thing because it really was a rant. It was probably unnecessary, but you know, sometimes one has to vent one's frustrations with things. And those are the hills there. That's the hill that I drove up, just right there. There is the airport. I'm not going to go in. The airport itself means absolutely nothing to me apart from the story that's worth telling about a flight I took over this piece of airspace on the way to Colesberg, which is where I'm going now. Along the road there are hundreds of windmills like this. The very, very first time that I can remember driving this route
while collecting a new vehicle was in 1997. I bought myself a Range Rover Classic. It was the final production run of Range Rover Classics, and I parked it here, and I'm pretty sure it was this particular windmill, and I'm actually not sure, but difficult to discern and establish exactly which one it was, but it was in this area, and filmed the windmill as it was spinning in the sunlight. And I remember parking the Range Rover near it and filming the blades spinning, and I used that windmill. I had a thing about windmills, and I used the image of that windmill spinning in the payoff for my television show. I've always absolutely loved windmills. So many occasions when driving this route, I would come through Colesberg and stop at this place here. The reason being is because the kids make windmills. Now, some years ago, the windmill that they were driven off. They weren't allowed to make windmills, and I'm very, very pleased to see that they're back. Now, socially, whether that was a good or bad thing to send them on their way, I don't know. But the fact is that the little windmills are still here. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Oh, I like those little windmills. I like this one. That's a very nice one. How much is this one? 30. Okay, hold that. Hold that one. Oh, these are all rather nice. Oh, there. Okay. Okay, I like the little one. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay. All right. Okay, hold them up. This Yona, yeah? That's okay. So come here. Okay. Okay, I'm going to take this one. So this one's for you. You come stand here. This one here. Stand there. So you hold on that one. I'm going to take that one. Let me see. Let me see this one. This one. I'm going to take this one. Okay.
This one.
Okay, I'm going to take this one. Okay, I'm going to take 1, 2, 3. 30, 30, 30, yeah? Okay, so 90. So I can give you 100, but you'll have to share it.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So if I give you 100, so if I give you 100 for 3, there's no fighting. You can share it. Can be okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Does one take?
Okay, I'm going to take. So I'm going to give you that. All right. That's for those 3. Okay. I can't take more. I can't take more. I'd like to take more, but I'm going to take 3, the small ones. Okay. All right.
Thanks.
All right.
This one is nice silver.
Okay. No, I like this. Thank you.
Silver
Okay.
one.
All right. Thank you, everybody. All right. Okay. Bye bye. So I've always had a. I just love these little things. These are much smaller, and I still have one at home in Australia that I actually. It's in my display of things, and I just think they're so charming. So I was actually very, very glad to see that they're still here. Anyway, there you go. Well, I saw the little boys running straight into the shop, and I wonder what they're going to go and buy. I hope they have a nice day. I'm trying to find the road. I'm doing it purely by memory. There is an airfield, and not only have I been to the airfield several times, I've actually filmed some reviews here. The Mercedes Geländewagen 300G Professional.
There it is. I see it now. Of course, now I remember. It's the other side of the Orange River. So we're going to cross the Orange River now, which is one of South Africa's major rivers, and we'll go and have a visit.
But before that, I found the windmill where I parked my Range Rover in 1999.
And then I parked my Range Rover there. I've been thinking about it. I worked it out that it was not 1997, as I think I said. It was 1999. Because I remember very clearly, 2 years after that, I didn't keep that vehicle very long, I got my first G-Wagon. And also had to do a trip all the way from Johannesburg
back to my home in Cape Town. And that was another ferry trip I took. You'll never guess what's happened. It's locked itself with the keys inside. I've got a serious problem. What do I do? I have no tools. I have to break a window. I don't think I've got any choice. I've heard it actually, it's a fault in the system, and I've heard it once lock itself, but it was trying to unlock itself or something was making noise. And now I've closed the door and it's locked itself. And my keys are in the ignition. You can see them there. I don't have spare keys. I'm going to have to break this window here, this quarter panel. I'm going to have to break it. I'm just trying to think of an alternative. I don't have wire. Whether wire would be any good. What else can I do? Glass everywhere, and do a bit of a clean up in here. Right, the only thing I've got in the car is some insulation tape, electrical insulation tape, and I think I might have some cardboard somewhere. And normally I would be very well equipped to handle such a thing. Now not so, but I do have basic kit. I don't have my Leatherman here. This is a Gerber multi-tool. It's about a quarter of as useful as a Leatherman. Is that going to stay with 100 km/h wind? Alright, let's go. They've all locked. Normally, they all unlock. So something is shorting out, and I actually think it's this system here. I'm having trouble with the system here. Can I see? Yeah, it's clear. So now, because of that, I have no security in the vehicle at all in Johannesburg, so I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. And that is, I'll now steal your car. It's a great big red flag. I must go through my archives and see what I can, because this is all so familiar to me.
And just like it was in 2012, the airfield is abandoned. But the airfield is not always this quiet.
I've been in the air now for 1.5 hours. I have Beaufort West ahead of me, and am doing the first long-distance cross-country flight that I've done in about 3 years. Actually traveling all the way from Cape Town to Johannesburg. I'm going to be stopping tonight at a place called Garib. Garib is a world-famous gliding area. Still probably an hour to go. I've had a good tailwind all day. estimated that my speed would be 110 knots. I think my average speed has probably been closer to 115 to 116 knots. So I just idled the propeller so you can hear me, and the weatherhead looks good, but I think the weatherhead is also going to be a little bit turbulent because there are clouds, and I'm feeling the effect of thermals. So I'll see you when I'm on the ground. My idea was to fly from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and this would be my halfway stopping off point. It would take me about 4 hours to get here, and I thought, well, let me do it in 2 stages. And I was over Beaufort West, where I had parked that vehicle for that commercial, and I was looking at my fuel, and I realized that in fact I was using a little more fuel than I had calculated, and that I would arrive here with empty tanks or close to empty tanks, and that's not viable flying. It's just not acceptable to take a risk like that. So I decided that, well, I should land at Beaufort West and refuel, but the runway there is full of tiny little stones, really, and they damage the propeller, so that would be the cost. So my alternative was shut the engine down and glide. Now, it wasn't a great gliding day, but it wasn't a terrible gliding day. It was what they call marginal. In other words, marginal to stay up. And I thought to myself, I would only need to glide 100 kilometers, and then I could motor the rest of the way on a reduced throttle, and I would arrive here with 45 or so minutes worth of fuel left in the airplane, which is what I would want to do. And so I thought, okay, let me do that. And if I fail, I did have enough sunlight, and I had enough of a weather window to be able to actually return to Beaufort West if needed. And I glided all the way except for the last 5 kilometers. I was coming over the hills, and I remember I could see all the planes lined up here. And I started descending, and I reached the Orange River, and I realized you're just gonna be short. The flight took me 6.5 hours, and it was the longest flight I ever had in that particular airplane. I came here and parked it here, and kind of just, you know, with all the people around flying and everything, it was just wonderful to see everybody. We were 1 or 2 people that I actually remembered from my old gliding days. And then I filled up the tanks of the airplane, and it was exactly half empty. My calculation had been bang on. But what a great day gliding that was. It was fantastic. The other time I came here and had a blast, and in fact the footage I shot during my visit in my glider was when I reviewed the Mercedes-Benz Geländewagen. But today I'm here to drive one of my favourite four-wheel drives. Harib Gliding Centre is completely deserted. The dozens of German pilots that flock here every year have all gone back to their rainy skies. And I'm here to get a feel for one of their least common four-wheel drive station wagons.
Nice memories. Really, really good memories. Now I've got to decide which route I take to Johannesburg. I could take the long route, the country route, or I could take the direct route. And you know something? I'm going to take the long route. A, I've got the time, and B, this road from here, I mean, you could hear how busy it was when I was fixing the window, how much traffic, and I don't feel like getting into that traffic. I'd rather just do a leisurely run. We've driven up here and we've taken this road here, and we're opposite the Harib Dam. We're there, so I'm going to go the back road. And where I will be tonight, I don't know. So I'm suggesting we go up along here, and then actually go down there, and then up here, and then next to Lesotho, and we go all the way up this road here. This is very, very pretty country, but it means getting to Johannesburg probably midday tomorrow, which is good by me. Sunday, midday, Joburg, traffic won't be bad. So that's what I'm going to do. This is extremely mountainous, so we'll be bypassing Lesotho. And yes, I have the keys in my pocket. I decided after all to take the gravel road. It's about 90 kilometers long to a town called Vepenaar, and and it's through beautiful country. I love this country. It's all yellow, grazing land, really gorgeous. This town is called Fariesberg, and I know this area extremely well. My in-laws actually ran a B&B in a town called Clarence, which is about a 20-minute drive. And I would kind of go to Clarence tonight, but I'm actually very tired. I've been on the road for close to 11 hours, and I'm just feeling that time to find a bed and something to eat. $70 for this.
In the previous part of this story, I drove the restored Landcruiser 105 1600 kilometers to Pretoria to arrive here.
Now, I have to convert a plain station wagon into a camper tourer type thing. Now this is not a conversion. I'm going to find products that I like. Some are brand new, so I'm kind of trying them for the first time, that I think will suit the vehicle really, really well. I want to keep it simple, but I also want to increase comfort and practicality around the camp. It includes a rooftop tent, an awning that I am told that is something really, really special. And I've decided not to go with a traditional drawer system. Instead, a self-contained kitchen. Quick Picture's rooftop tent is new on the market. I know little about it. It will, like all of the others before it, make its mark on the industry and go into competition with manufacturers like Easy Orn, Alucab. But the devil is in the detail. What makes a product like this really, really good? The way you live with it, the way it treats you. Not just the way it looks or how practical it is. So I'm going to have to go on a proper camping trip to be able to report and do a proper review on this tent. But what I can tell you right now is that because of this strip here going the entire length, and this strip here going the entire length, for the first time that I can see, a roof tent manufacturer has actually designed it with the idea that the tent is the roof rack. Why have a roof rack that is 100% covered in a tent? And most tents, you need a rack, then you put the tent on top, then you attach the bits and pieces onto the sides of the roof rack. But the rest of the roof rack is taken up by tent. This is a roof rack and a tent. Or it's a tent and it's also a roof rack. Because my goal is maximum roof rack total weight under 100 kilograms. A few days later, I left the vehicle with them for them to do the installation, and here it is. Right, basically it consists of Quick Pitch weather shade, their new awning, the Quick Pitch rooftop tent, and the kitchen unit. That's basically what they've done. I've still got to put in the electrical systems and things like that, which will now be added to the vehicle at some time in the future. So I've selected the 56 litre Snowmaster dual door. I have it in my Troopy in Australia, and I have been told it'll fit, and I don't think it will. I think that space is too small. Come on, let's see. That sticks out a lot, eh? Those hinges. So I'm going to leave now with the vehicle as it is. I would have loved to have spent more time getting to know these products. I just do not have the time to do that in Johannesburg this moment. So they'll be, when I get back to Australia, I'll have a closer look at the products, obviously not on this vehicle, and then the first big trip for this vehicle is scheduled for July 2020.
But before I leave town, seat covers.
Many of you that watch the channel will know that I have a particular favorite seat covers. I'm actually a little bit fussy about seat covers because, well,
Some make you sweat, some absorb sweat, some are just very heavy, some kind of are okay, but they don't fit nicely and they don't look particularly nice. Some look gorgeous for the first year, and then when you wash them, they don't look very good after that. And I could go on and on. So that's why I just keep coming back again and again to these guys at Tackler. It's a South African product. I tried a few of the Australian products. None quite match the quality of these. Oh, doesn't it look good now with its roof rack and tent and everything on? Anyway, yes, where was I? Seat covers, yes. So lightning visit to Tackler. They're fitting a set that I asked them to make for me. And it's happening now. Actually, and this time I'm taking a little bit of a risk in that I'm trying one of their new products. They call it the Signature range, and it has a very, very thin layer of foam between the seat and the seat cover itself. And I've been told, and in addition to all its other properties, it enhances comfort. And another one of Tackler's brilliant products, it's called Tack Mat. They're floor mats that cover the entire floor space, completely washable, incredibly robust, absolutely love them. And some of them even have sound insulation built into them. For the first time during this entire build, I just feel a sense of excitement, but at the same time, disappointment, because I now have to leave. I'm leaving the vehicle here, and all I really want to do at this very moment is stick around and finish it. Right, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to erect the tent. I have never pitched it before. It is brand new to me. I've seen a few videos and that's all. So I have absolutely no idea if it's going to be any good. It is a new product made by Quick Pitch. Okay, so that actually, it was like a vacuum inside. It seals so well. It seals so well I couldn't open it. But now, actually, it's very little effort to lift it. Very little effort. Alrighty. Okay, that looks big. It's bigger than I'm used to in terms of just the sheer size of it. So really now, guys, this is my first impression of this tent. I really... okay, here's an interesting thing. This is the ladder. They're not making their own ladder. Thank goodness you're not making your own ladder. Because some of the tents available today, the ladders are a joke, and a lot of people that actually buy those tents replace the ladders with these commercially available expandable ladders. Okay, so okay, all right, I'm going to show you up there now. But first, what I'm going to do first, before I do that, is I'm going to open the awning, because again, first time I've ever opened it. I don't know how long it's going to take me. And I'm going to pretend it's like my old one, to kind of treat it the same way. See if it opens. All right. 1, 2, 3. Pull those out. Okay. Let it drop. Grab this and walk. All right. Let's see. All right, here you go. It's got 4 legs, arms I should say, 4 arms, not the normal 3. I wonder why they did that. This thing is a little hair. Somebody was using their brain when they designed this. Look at this guy here. So it can clip onto any bolt that looks like an 8. Probably 8, it might be 10, no, I think it's an 8, okay. So any 10mm bolt. But here's the thing where I think this is really clever. You can take this, and so if you've got a pole, okay, if you've got a pole, any kind of pole, and you want to wrap this around the pole, you just do that. You see how versatile that is? And that is unique. That's a unique, completely fresh look at the clasp here. And then we tighten it. And there's the awning. Wow, it's big. This is really big. Okay, this is not the same as I'm used to.
actually not too dissimilar, and it's much bigger than my previous one, but I'm trying to figure out why it's much bigger. Oh, I think I figured it out. The previous one had one arm here, then another arm here, so it went straight from that arm to this arm. And because this has got another arm, you've got an extra, give or take, I don't know, that much? I suppose you'd have to put them next to each other to compare, but this is much longer. This feels this much longer than my previous one. So that's, oh, I think it's fantastic. I like that very much. Quite impressed. Now, the next test is, because awnings like this are really good for those people that want a quick shade solution. If I was camping at a beach for a week and a half, I might have something like this, but the thing is that when the sun gets very low, you can't tilt the arms down. And so they have limited appeal. For people that are on the move quite often and want shade quickly, 270 like this, that's the deal. Okay, so, but the question is, you could see how quick it was for me to open. It was really quick for me to open. I have never opened or closed this before, and I'm going to time myself to see how quickly I can close this. Oh, but before I do, I've got something to show you. One thing that's been worrying me though, because this has got an upper and lower tailgate and not a side opening tailgate, whether the awning would actually be a problem for this to be open. And it's not, but it is touching. So what I would do to modify mine is I would put a little strip of rubber here so it doesn't damage but it doesn't interfere at all. And in fact, there's a massive amount of shade behind me. Massive. That's a bit bigger. This is much bigger. Every rooftop tent that I think I've ever used, particularly this type, the closed shell type, have problems with ladders because they're not long enough. And when they are long enough, they don't fit into the tent capsule itself. The tent isn't long enough for the length of the ladder. So then what do you do with the ladder? You add an extension to it, and then it kinks and it bang, and it's a hassle, okay? And everyone I've owned has had that problem. And I used to think to myself, why don't you have an expandable ladder? They're available. They're made in China. They're cheap. And it doesn't matter how high your vehicle is. It doesn't matter how high they are. It just doesn't matter how high they are. Look at this. So what we do is, so we tilt that in there. Now I must tell you, this is the first time I've done it, so I don't know what I'm doing. I'm actually doing this for the very first time, genuinely. Oh, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. Okay, that's how you do it. Right, so now the best thing to do is to hook this on. Actually, I'd probably leave the strap closed. Do this first. So all you do is you take that and you drop that in like that. Yeah, there you go. Simple as that. Simple as that. That's so easy. Okay, so quick pitch. Thank you. The amount of times I've suggested this to other tent manufacturers, they just ignore you. Well, they ignore me. Maybe it's just me. So, climbing up the ladder into the tent. Now let's have a look at this tent. Haven't been up the tent before, so let's just get it ready. All right. Nice. So, I mean, it is impossible to do a proper review of a tent without sleeping in it for a couple of nights, a week. You can't. You know, just like this. Material is good. Lots of storage, space. Up top, I've seen them make it. There's good. I actually thought over the top insulation underneath, but you know, these metal tents, you get a lot of coldness coming from underneath because they're metal, and it's a big thing with these tents. If you're not well insulated underneath, it can get very cold in them because of that, and I know that from first-hand experience. And they have got a big dense foam, it's about 12 mil, covered with a layer of carpet, and they've done something, and I was watching them make it. I didn't see exactly what they did, but there's good insulation. And this mattress is, well, my guess is it's a very, very good mattress. Some of these tents are really, really cheap and horrible mattresses, but you can upgrade them. It's not difficult to upgrade a mattress. So, I mean, what do you think? First impressions are that it's going to be very nice. And you know, oh, you know what? Where are the PowerPoints? Now, the competitor's tent that I have used, and it's basically a sister of the Hercules design, they have sockets and lights at the side. The lights lie down, they face up, and all they do is blind you. You can't actually use them, because if you're in the tent changing or something, you've got this thing blinding you. I'm really hoping they haven't made the same mistake with this one. So let's have a look. Okay. Okay. This is going to be better. It's not plugged in, so I can't test it. It's an LED light. Let's have a look at there. It's got a nice high stalk. Okay, so what you would do with this one is you could face it upwards. Yeah, I'm not actually sure. So I'm not convinced about the light, but then again, you know, you can't tell you have to do a proper review. I cannot tell without actually living in the tent, spending night in the tent, and you can't. I'd be guessing. So I think it's a better solution. It certainly looks better quality, but a light up top would be better. And I actually use those little lanterns, but those Nightcore LR10 lanterns with a little bit of Velcro on it, and I stick it up there. And I actually don't bother with the lights at all in the tent. So what do you think, eh? What do you think? Shoes? Place for shoes. Thank goodness, a place for shoes. One of the problems with any rooftop tent in wet weather, where do you put your shoes? Where do you put your wet shoes? Thank you. There must be other tent manufacturers that have pockets like this in them. I don't know, mate, there probably are. I just haven't seen them for myself. I think, okay, here's an idea. Tent manufacturers, I think that you should actually include a pocket on the outside. Waterproof, like a basket. Enough for 2 pairs of shoes, or one on each side, whatever. And it hangs on the outside, so you can literally stand here and take off your boots and put them in, and then put the flap over, so they're kind of watertight. There's an idea for a tent manufacturer. Okay, quick pitch, how about that? How about doing that, eh? Okay, oh, this is an interesting design thing that I've just seen. Look at the angle of the strut. You see that strut? It's almost vertical. What that means is that you can actually load stuff on top of the roof of the tent, and those shocks, which can be adjusted, not by hand, you have to get them pumped up and adjusted, but can easily be adjusted to carry loads on top of the tent. I think that's the reason why they've made it almost vertical. It has an interesting design here on the, see that leading edge there? You see that leading edge? There's no hinge. It's actually, I watched them while they were assembling them. That's an extrusion. One of the troubles with rooftop tents is that when it's pouring with rain and you're traveling at speed, you get such a high air pressure in front of the tent that it actually pushes water into the tent. And so, unless you've got a really good seal, it can leak. So, you know, and over the years, it might not leak first year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, but eventually the rubbers start to deteriorate and then leaks start. No, there are rubbers, but in front of the rubbers, there's no hinge at all. I think that's very clever. All right, now let's have a look in the back, show you the kitchen unit, and then I'll time myself putting it away.
This is actually a kitchen unit. It's not a traditional drawer system because, well, you'll see in a minute. And they've left this area clear for me. And I like that. I'm not going to put another drawer in here because the fact is that I can put 6 ammo boxes in that space. 6. That's a lot of stuff. All right, so I don't have the fridge. Now you saw earlier that we tried to fit that fridge. That was a 57 litre, I think, dual door. Being a dual door, it was a little bit bigger than some of the others. So unfortunately, the one that I wanted couldn't fit. But it's actually designed for a 60 litre. So some 60 litre models actually do fit in here. So you need to get that. If you're interested in one of these, you need to contact Quick Pitch and say, what fridges fit? All right, they need to give you that information because it's impossible for me. But this is, I want to show you this because when I saw this, I just went, oh wow, you've solved a major problem. Like the ladder, you've solved an ongoing problem with fridges in the back of station wagons. Watch this. So that now would be my fridge. It's at this level. I can see into it. Isn't that cool? Kitchen drawer. Prep table. Sturdy enough. Maybe not sturdy enough, quite sturdy enough to chop big bits of biltong, but sturdy enough for prep. And my stove. Other cooking stuff. And when I want to put it away, oh, that was a bit too energetic of me. There you go. And what do you think about this Tackler seat cover? Aren't they nice? Man, they're nice. They even did a cover for that for me, which was nice because it had some kind of wear marks on the top of it, and they sorted that out. These seat covers are fantastic, absolutely wonderful. I do want to repeat that I've never done this before. To me, if you time it and you've never done it before, then it's kind of accurate. It's you know, it's a real representation of, I mean, once you've done it a few more times, the speed is going to be reduced. So if I do it and time it the very first time, and you know, it's fast, then, well, then that's pretty good, isn't it? It means it's not complicated and I don't have to figure it out. So that's really what I'm trying to achieve here. So it's got, let me see, okay, it's got straps. So I need to put my hand over there and grab the straps and pull them down. Let's see, there'll be another one here, and I think there were 3, weren't there? The 2, only 2. Maybe the third one was the side. You see, this is what's taking up time. There it is. There's the 3. So, okay, see how easy this is. So I hope you guys have got your watches going because I don't know how long it's taking me. But, okay, this is, all right, that's a familiar way of doing it. Works pretty well, but the slots are a lot bigger, so they're easier to thread. Slots where you slot this in. Oh, I remember the other one is a bit fiddly because they're not quite big enough, but anyway, it's not a big deal. Let's see. Okay, so now 3 of them, and very nice. Okay, that's pretty easy, wasn't it? There's really nothing to it. Really, absolutely nothing to it at all. Well, they call it a weather shade because I think they're trying to say by the word weather shade that it's not just for shade. It's not just for shade. It's for weather too. So the only way I'll know. Okay, stop the clock. I think that's pretty quick. But am I cheating? It's very similar to my previous one, so I did kind of know what to look for. All right. So packing this away. How easy is it this now? So I don't know how the ladder's going to work because this is interesting because how. Okay, so I push it up, do I? Let's try this. Okay, all right, push it up. Ah, that's how you do it. Okay, all right. That makes sense. That actually makes sense. Not difficult to do at all. And then the final one
You lift it out. Okay, that was very easy. That was very easy indeed. All right, again, first time I've ever done it. So, and actually I think this still goes down more. No? Oh, I know what happens. This goes up over here. Okay, and that can now go up there. So, that was pretty straightforward. Again, first time. I'm going to put that in there. So I can, it's so short that I can put it this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. Oh, my aim was to get the roof load under 100 kilos. Here now is the actual weight. There. How did I do? At this very moment, I have no idea. I reckon I'm within 10 kilos of 100 kilos. I might be, if I'm over, I don't think I'm over by 10. That's my guess. That's the result there. You see it written there? I wonder what, at this very moment, I wonder what it is because, well, I don't know. Gee, that looks big. That opening is huge. All right, let's see how easy this is to pull down. Oh my heavens, that's easy to pull down. That's really easy to pull down. Really easy to pull down. In fact, there's no effort in this at all. Okay, but now here's when very important. You must be able to put it. This is very important with a rooftop tent. You must be able to open it. Even this much is enough. Okay, so that now you can tidy up your stuff. Make sure it's all good. Make sure it's pulled in without this thing, without having to hold it down, which is important to me. Okay, I forgot to put this out. Okay, it does help it. And then close it. All right. So that's it. That's my trip done. I'm sad to be leaving, actually, to be honest with you. Man, I'd love to take this thing on a trip now. But all the other pressures on my work and everything requires that I return to Perth. It's going to be almost 10 months between now and when I get to play with it some more. So, you know, my daughter Kate and her husband Cameron and their sailing channel, they're going to be borrowing it to do a few trips, very light trips, not off-road or anything like that. I said to them they can use it because, hey, a couple of young people like that with a truck like this. And mostly, I want to thank our Patreons, the channel's Patreons. You made this possible. You are making this content possible. You are the guys that are going to make the trips that I'm planning next year to Zambia, Malawi, maybe Uganda. Okay, big trip next year. You are making it possible. And for those of you that are not Patreons, Patreon basically is, thank you, Andrew. I'll support. All you have to do is support one video that I make by paying a contribution towards one video I make each month. If you choose to support one video, or I normally make 4 a month, sometimes 5. Even if you choose to support just one video, you get every video. You become one of the family. It's as simple as that. And it's you guys, and you know who you are, that make this possible. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And also you YouTube guys, I know that a lot of you love the work. Some of you, many of you, have been patrons for a while. You've gone away for one reason or another. It's cool. It's fine. Just enjoy the shows, comment, share, be a part of the community. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you, for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, what's stopping you?